Chapter 977. Wendy was Lin Yuan's contracted life form, which was equivalent to a part of his strength. Swamp Moss became a believer of Wendy. It was equivalent to giving him the power of a Class 10-dimensional life form. A Class 10-dimensional life form strength was equivalent to a suzerain Class 10 Genesis I Fey. Lin Yuan carried Wendy and stepped on the swamp's water moss, heading toward the drinking venom snake vulture's remains. Lin Yuan asked the swamp water moss while advancing. If I use faith power before the power within the incomplete exquisite body totem imprint runs out, will the apostle with the incomplete exquisite body totem imprint sense it? Swamp water moss replied. Incomplete and exquisite body tui? That stinky scorpion should have already sensed the death of his believers. However, this place is very far from that stinky scorpion's nest. Even at full speed, the water-drinking serpent vulture will need nearly a month and a half. From such a great distance, even as an apostle, I can't sense the totem imprint I've carved on XN Min's body. Therefore, it wouldn't matter even if I destroyed the totem mark on the body. At that time, as long as Lady Wendy uses the totem on her body and uses the power of the totem to absorb the remains of the snake vulture, the exquisite totem imprint will be able to absorb the power of faith within the totem imprint. When apostles meet each other, they will definitely fight to the death, mutually plunder each other's totems. I didn't expect Lady Wendy to get along so well with the other apostles. Lin Yuan could clearly feel the doubt in the marsh water moss's words. Since the marsh water moss said it was fine, Lin Yuan said to Wendy, "Wendy, activate your triflower snake pupil totem to absorb the power of faith." Upon hearing his words, Wendy nodded obediently. Immediately after, a totem that looked like a green eye appeared on Wendy's forehead. The three pupils in the totem rotated rapidly, and each pupil turned into a small flower. When the three of them gathered together, an amber light fell on the mark on the snake vulture's body. This amber totemic power was clearly a level higher than the grayish-black light on the water-drinking serpent vulture's totemic mark. The light of the triflower snake pupil totem pierced through the grayish-black light on the totem mark on the broken body. Immediately, a faint milky white power fused with the amber light, and the power of faith accumulated in Wendy's body continued to grow. By the time Wendy used the triflower snake pupil totem to completely absorb the power of faith accumulated in the exquisite totem, Wendy's power of faith was still in an extremely weak state. However, Wendy's triflower snake pupil totem was clearly brighter than the multi-headed lizard totem on Shiteng's front body. After Wendy finished absorbing the power of faith, Lin Yuan suddenly thought of something and asked her, "Wendy, if you use your innate skill, Snake Descendant Paradise, to turn a snake life form into your snake hair, is there a requirement for the quality of snake life forms?" Upon hearing that, Wendy tilted her head and asked Lin Yuan in confusion, "What is quality?" Wendy doesn't know. Wendy only knows those little snakes. The more poisonous they are, the more powerful Wendy is. Upon hearing her words, Lin Yuan nodded. It seemed like his contracted Wendy was also a little prodigal and had extremely high requirements for snake phase quality. This was because the higher the quality of a snake phase, the more poisonous it would be. It seemed like it was best to raise the quality of those snake phase that he had collected for Wendy to bronze/legend. Although the number of hairs of a Medusa could not compare to that of a human, some powerful Medusa often had thousands of snake hairs. Lin Yuan suddenly felt that it was really good for Wendy's family to be so deceptive. Fortunately, it was much easier for him to nurture bronze/legend phase now. Currently, one spirit chi crystal in the spirit lock spatial zone could produce 50 to 60 bronze/legend phase in batches. Therefore, Lin Yuan could still afford to raise Wendy. Lin Yuan said as he sensed the anticipation that was about to overflow from the swamp water moss. "Since you want Wendy to accept you as a believer, you have to convince Wendy yourself." After saying that, he placed Wendy in the arms of the slaughter sky butterfly in human form. Then he said to Endless Summer, "Endless Summer, let's go. I'll take you to the place where you planted your sacred source life form Arakawa orchid sprout." When Endless Summer came out of Lin Yuan's artifact made from the treasure cave golden toad skin and stomach sac, she already knew where she was. Endless Summer did not expect Lin Yuan to have the ability to freely enter and exit dimensional worlds from the main world. There was really no place more suitable for planting Arakawa orchid sprout than the swamp world. However, Endless Summer did not even dare to think of planting Arakawa orchid sprout in the swamp world. After arriving at the location marked with the ethereal jellyfish's tentacles, Lin Yuan said, "The water content of this place is not bad. The water content of this place is pretty good. My feet will sink into my ankles when I step on it. The water here is replenished by the endless swamp ahead. No matter how much the Arakawa orchid sprout absorbs, it will be able to maintain an adequate water source. If the Arakawa orchid sprout grows more in the future and its demand for water increases, I can find some spirit craftsmen to build a circle of water around the Arakawa orchid sprout. This way the Arakawa orchid sprout will never have to worry about its water source. The swamp world is rich in a lot of swamp soil, which is of great help to the Arakawa orchid sprout star class. I have collected a lot of swamp soil now. In a while, I will bury the swamp soil suitable for the Arakawa orchid sprout to absorb under this land. Let the Arakawa orchid sprout absorb it to grow faster and strengthen your strength as soon as possible. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Endless Summer was moved once again. Lin Yuan was always so considerate to his companions. Endless Summer stretched out her palm, and a delicate orchid sprout appeared in her palm. Endless Summer carefully inserted this delicate orchid sprout into the ground. Immediately after, Lin Yuan could clearly feel that this delicate Arakawa orchid sprout was like a huge sewer that was frenziedly absorbing water. At the same time, Lin Yuan used true data to check on the Arakawa orchid sprout and found that its roots were growing rapidly. With the Arakawa orchid sprout as the center, the densely packed roots had spread out to a radius of 100 meters in just half a minute. The roots that had spread out to a radius of 100 meters were still constantly expanding. The roots were all more than 400 meters underground, frantically squeezing the nutrients in the ground. Under the large amount of nutrients, the delicate Arakawa orchid sprout was slowly growing. The orchid fragrance on the delicate Arakawa orchid sprout was getting stronger and stronger. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan made a selection from all of his swamp soil. The second one was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 978. He selected 25 lumps of intermediate swamp soil suitable for Arakawa orchid to absorb and buried them around Arakawa orchid. Nourished by the 25 lumps of swamp soil, Arakawa orchid sprout grew a stalk. It seemed that this Arakawa orchid sprout was preparing to bud. When the flower bud bloomed, Endless Summer would have the ability to heal. I'll get the slaughtering butterfly to guard this area. Together with the swamp water moss, as long as no 11th dimensional creatures appear, there shouldn't be any safety problems. A few batches of spirit craftsmen will enter the swamp world in a few days. I will have these spirit craftsmen build a greenhouse to protect Arakawa orchid sprout. The talent of the marsh water moss is very helpful for the growth of Arakawa orchid sprout. I will let Wendy command the marsh water moss to help the Arakawa orchid sprout grow. You don't have to worry about the matters in the swamp world. Go to the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce during this time. The Nix assembly has already ended. Some people probably can't wait any longer. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Endless Summer nodded. Lin Yuan, you might as well send me out of the swamp world now. I'll go to the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce immediately. I'll be in charge of the Spirit Deer Chamber of Commerce. You can also transfer Duanhe back. Duanhe had wanted to go out and train for a period of time to improve Purple Demon's strength. Now is the perfect opportunity. Upon hearing Endless Summer's words, Lin Yuan nodded. If Duanhe wanted to go out to train, Lu Jie as the white-robed majordomo had been collecting white-robed followers. Including Zhou Luo, there were now a total of 14 white-clothed followers in Sky City. At that time, he could let Duanhe take these white-clothed followers out to train and improve their strength at the same time. After sending the artifacts made from the treasure cave Golden Toad's stomach and skin back to the main world, he returned to the swamp world again. He didn't know what kind of magic potion Swamp Water Moss had fed Wendy, but now Swamp Water Moss had become one of Wendy's believers. The data from before had also changed greatly. Exotic beast name, Swamp Water Moss. Life form, dimensional creature, blessed believer. Exotic beast level, 10. Totem faith, Triflower snake pupil totem. Innate skills, frowny face, mossy green domain. Rapidly divides the main body into small and delicate water moss. The small and delicate water moss can parasitize any life that the water moss comes into contact with, absorbing all the nutrients in the life's body that can be decomposed. Or the little water moss could sacrifice itself to provide the nutrients needed for survival for a specific plant or animal on the water moss that it could touch. At the same time, its main body could also produce a part of the water moss that was suitable for floating in the swamp and sense the surrounding environment through the water moss. After the swamp water moss became a blessed believer, its talent ability, Mossy Green Field, gained a new detection ability. With this detection function, he could use the swamp water moss to explore the situation in the boundless swamp. This way he could use Hub Klein as the core to map the swamp world bit by bit. After the marsh water moss became Wendy's believers, almost the entire land was covered with a thick layer of moss. The soft moss made Lin Yuan feel like he was stepping on an expensive cashmere carpet. Without needing Lin Yuan's instructions, the swamp water moss had already started to sacrifice itself to provide nutrients for the Arakawa orchid sprout. No matter where Wendy went, the swamp water moss would bloom with hundreds of small pink flowers around her. Looking at the environment in front of him, Lin Yuan was very satisfied. The power of faith in the exquisite imprint on the drinking goblet snake vulture's remnant body had been completely absorbed by Wendy. However, as a Class 11 dimensional life form, the drinking goblet snake vulture's body hid something that Lin Yuan had never come into contact with so far. After a Fae became a creation breed, if it was killed, it would be able to find the Law Crystal in the creation breed Fae's body. The World Crystal, which was transformed from a Law Crystal, could be found in the creation breed Fae's body. Dimensional life forms were no exception. When a dimensional life form reached Class 10, the Law Crystal in its body would transform into a World Crystal. Looking at the Class 11 drinking goblet snake vulture's body, Lin Yuan did not know how to start for a moment. As a Class 11 dimensional life form, even after death, the drinking goblet snake vulture's body was very solid and hard. Unless Lin Yuan commanded the princess to transform into the sacred sword form and borrow the law power, he would be able to cut the drinking goblet snake vulture's body and dig out the world crystal. However, this operation was really too wasteful. Just as Lin Yuan was about to find the slaughter butterfly and let it cut it up, the princess's surprised voice suddenly sounded in Lin Yuan's mind. "Wow, master. When did you get such delicious food? I want to eat it. I want to eat it. I want to eat it. I want to eat it." As she spoke, the ahog on the princess's head stood up one by one. Looking at the princess in the depths of his soul, Lin Yuan felt that she was just short of drooling. Lin Yuan thought that the princess was talking about the world crystal hidden in the drinking goblet snake vulture's body. Who would have thought that the princess's next words would make Lin Yuan's face light up with joy? Every inch of this Class 11 dimensional lifeform's flesh contains a trace of source-type power. Therefore, as long as a dimensional lifeform is above Class 10, I can absorb every inch of its flesh. This Class 11 dimensional lifeform is also a favored believer, so the source-type power contained in its flesh has become even more. Although these source-type powers are very mixed, like ribs that are hard to chew. But I'll definitely be able to chew them clean. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan summoned the princess and said, "Then you might as well absorb the drinking goblet snake vulture's body now. Then you might as well absorb the drinking goblet snake vulture's body now. But keep the world crystal in the drinking goblet snake vulture's body first. I'll check it first before letting you absorb it." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, the princess happily agreed. Then she danced in midair, and the edges of her dress scattered into silk threads. Nearly 10,000 silk threads wrapped the drinking goblet snake vulture's body firmly. As the princess absorbed the source-type power in the drinking goblet snake vulture's body, Lin Yuan found that she had actually absorbed nearly 550 portions of source-type power from the Class 11 dimensional lifeform's body. This was equivalent to making up for the source-type power that Lin Yuan had consumed for the perfect source baptism for Wendy and Shiteng. It had even allowed Lin Yuan to obtain an additional 50 portions of source-type power. Lin Yuan felt that as the main world's major factions explored the abyss, they would sooner or later obtain the bodies of Class 10 and Class 11 dimensional lifeforms. At that time, exchanging for these bodies from the major factions would undoubtedly be more cost-effective than exchanging for law source crystals. When the princess's dress formed tens of thousands of silk threads and swayed, a dazzling crystal reflected in Lin Yuan's eyes. Chapter 979. Lin Yuan saw a faint golden light flickering in the crystal. Upon seeing this golden light, Lin Yuan suddenly felt that it was a little familiar, as though he had seen this golden light before. Apart from the sparkling golden light inside the crystal, there were also several milky white power flowing like water. At first glance, it was like seeing the Milky Way setting sun in broad daylight. Immediately after, Lin Yuan's mind was left with the princess voice of wanting to eat it. Lin Yuan could clearly feel that the princess had fallen into a state of madness. Upon seeing the princess in such a state, Lin Yuan knew that the foodie was really craving for food. This also showed the preciousness of the world source crystal produced in the body of the Class 11 snake vulture. However, Lin Yuan was still unclear about the use of this world source crystal and needed to ask the princess. Even Genius had almost all the knowledge of Class 4 Scholar, Class 4 Fey Observer, and Class 4 Fey Analyst. It still knew nothing about things at the level of the world source crystal. This was because the information of such things would not appear on Star Web. Lin Yuan reached out to the princess, who was standing beside him with her hair standing on end, and pressed down her hair before saying, "Princess, you want to eat this world source crystal so much. Princess, if you want to eat this world origin crystal so much, what's the use of it after eating it? What can it be broken down into?" When the princess heard Lin Yuan's words, her hair that had just been pressed down stood up again. "Master, once I eat this world source crystal, I can break it down into a world crystal that contains pure world power that can help creation breed phase break through their limits. As for how to use the world crystal, I don't know." Upon hearing the princess' words, Lin Yuan raised his brows slightly. This function could be said to be within Lin Yuan's expectations. The world source crystal also had the same ability as the law source crystal. However, the law source crystal produced in the bodies of class 7 to class 9 dimensional lifeforms would be used on myth breed phase. On the other hand, the world source crystal produced in the bodies of class 10 and above dimensional lifeforms would be used on creation breed phase. Endless Summer's current strength was that of the creation lineage. When Lin Yuan had previously communicated with Endless Summer, he knew that there was a threshold for creation breed phase in the 5 creation lineages. Before the 5 creation lineages, phase still had to absorb pure power of law to perfect the world of law that had evolved from law. However, at the peak of the 4 bloodlines of creation, the nomological power in the nomological world had already reached its peak. The world of laws could no longer contain any more rule power. At that moment, phase could only slowly refine the massive law power in the law world into pure world power to increase their strength again. In other words, when a Fae reached the 5 tribulations of creation, the law world would no longer have the power of law. Instead, it was all converted into world energy. According to the information he had obtained from Endless Summer, he felt that if he let the princess decompose the world source crystal, the world source crystal would be destroyed. The world crystal that contained pure nomological power should only be used by 5 tribulations of creation and above. This was the same logic as only myth breed phase at the pinnacle of myth 2 and above could use the law crystal. A world crystal that contains pure rule force is indeed a good thing. However, Lin Yuan could not use such good items at all and could only keep them at the bottom of the box. However, Lin Yuan was exceptionally happy that the world source crystals were within his expectations. The Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift in the Radiance Federation had only just opened. The Radiance Federation's top factions and veteran factions had only just begun to explore the Abyss world. It could be said that the highest dimensional rift that had opened in the entire Radiance Federation was only Class 5. The strongest dimensional life form in the Class 5 dimensional rift was only Class 9. Lin Yuan did not know about the situation with the Majesties, but the major veteran factions and top factions should not have world source crystals in their hands. The major veteran factions and top factions could not even use the law source crystals. Presumably, even if they obtained world source crystals from the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift, they could only put them in their hands and look at them. At that time, Lin Yuan would have the opportunity to exchange rare resources for the world source crystals that the major veteran factions and top factions obtained. Lin Yuan was invisibly receiving the support of all the veteran factions and top factions exploring the Abyss world. Lin Yuan felt that the feeling of being supported by all the major factions should be very good. Lin Yuan realized that the opening of the Radiance Federation's Class 6 Abyss world should be considered an opportunity in a sense. He must grasp this opportunity. However, he was already developing the Swamp world. Should he still consume manpower and resources to develop the Abyss world? This had become a problem that Lin Yuan needed to think about carefully. Although the Swamp world was far more suitable for development than the Abyss world also had something that the Swamp world could not compare to. The opening of the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift would indicate that the price of Fire-type spiritual ingredients in the Radiance Federation would decrease significantly. At that time, the major factions that dealt in spiritual ingredients would be hit by the sharp decrease in the price of Fire-type spiritual ingredients. When Lin Yuan had used the flower brocade pearls to trade for extraordinary flames, he had specifically checked the price of extraordinary flames. He had found that some factions' functions were actually to deal in the extraordinary flames trade. No matter how strong these factions' backing was, as long as they used extraordinary flames as a function, they would suffer a devastating blow. At that time, the price of demon flesh, which had the highest unit price among all dimensional lifeforms' flesh, would also decrease significantly. In that case, the price of the underground world and the swamp world's dimensional lifeforms' flesh would definitely rise. The price increase determined by the market trend would definitely cause the major chambers of commerce to take the initiative to raise the price of the underground world and the swamp world's dimensional lifeforms' flesh. Lin Yuan did not need to worry at all. He only needed to follow the market trend. He would be able to make unlimited profits through the resources produced by the swamp world. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard the princess continue to speak. Master, do you remember the 2 small golden pearls that you condensed by collecting the endless summer and the slaughtering butterflies creation earth veins? Upon hearing the princess' words, Lin Yuan suddenly knew why the golden light in the world source crystal had been so familiar. It was because the golden light in the world source crystal was the same color as the creation earth veins that the creation breed phase had descended after experiencing the creation calamity. Lin Yuan had not taken the time to ask the princess what the 2 golden pearls were used for. Now that the princess had taken the initiative to mention it, Lin Yuan naturally had to ask clearly. Lin Yuan flipped his hand and took out the 2 small golden beads before asking the princess, "What is it?" He asked the princess, "Princess, since you mentioned the creation earth veins condensed into golden pearls." Chapter 980. Then you should know what these 2 little golden beads are used for. The princess hurriedly replied. Master, did you notice that after I used source energy to upgrade the complete rule to a rule world, there was no creation earth vein in the rule world? Lin Yuan nodded in response. Under normal circumstances, the law existed in a living myth breed phase body. If a myth breed fae wanted to obtain the creation earth vein, it would have to undergo the world creation calamity. The princess only needed origin energy to strengthen the complete rule. Everything was as calm as the wind and the waves. When he had used the Dark Death World's power, he found that the damage of the Dark Death World's Jackdaw Withering Strike was far less than that of a creation breed fae. At most, it would be comparable to an all-out attack from a Pinnacle Myth 2 fae. At the thought of the 2 golden pearls that he had condensed by absorbing endless summer and the slaughtering butterflies creation earth veins, he asked the princess, "Can these 2 gold beads be integrated into the world of dark death?" These 2 golden pearls came from the earth vein of creation, so they should have the same effect as the earth vein of creation. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, the princess first nodded and then shook her head. The 2 golden pearls come from different creation breed phase, so the 2 golden pearls formed from the creation breed earth veins are very different. The Dark Death World can only embed one of the golden beads to create the Genesis geographical vein. Apart from being able to purify world crystals that contain pure world energy, world source crystals can also absorb a higher level of pure source energy. I can use this pure origin energy to strengthen the little golden bead embedded in the rule world, allowing the little golden bead to grow into a complete Genesis earth vein. At that time, through source energy, I can continue to break through the quality of the world of laws. It's just that every time the nomological world's quality is upgraded, the nomological world's interior needs to be reborn into a complete world creation geographical vein before it can be upgraded again. Upon hearing the princess' words, Lin Yuan immediately had a detailed understanding of the usage of the gold beads and the world source crystals produced from dimensional life forms that were class 10 and above. Through Morbius' exclusive skill, Pure Land of Bliss, he had absorbed a larger number of gold pearls from Endless Summer's creation earth vein than from the slaughtering sky butterfly's creation earth vein. Lin Yuan handed the golden bead he had absorbed from Endless Summer's calamity of creation to the princess. Princess, merge this golden bead with the Dark Death World. Then absorb this world origin crystal and use it to strengthen the golden orb implanted in the Dark Death Rule. Hearing Lin Yuan's words, the princess replied, Master, it will take about 7 days to transplant this golden bead into the Dark Death Realm. But after 7 days, the power of the Dark Death World with the Earth Vein of Creation will increase tremendously. If Master uses Holy Sword mode to use Dark Crow Withering Strike, the lethality of Dark Crow Withering Strike will increase. But Master, can I eat this world origin crystal before transplanting the gold bead into the Dark Death World? I've never tasted a world origin crystal before. Upon hearing the princess' words, Lin Yuan couldn't help but smile. This was not really a request. Of course, Lin Yuan had to pamper his sacred source life form. Upon seeing Lin Yuan nod, the princess immediately spun around happily and let out a burst of crisp and cheerful laughter. After Lin Yuan obtained the world origin crystal and had a conversation with the princess, he realized how long he still had to go. It would not be difficult for him to absorb laws through the princess' skirt to increase his strength. However, it would not be easy to raise his strength to a higher level. It was not easy to collect the earth vein of creation from under the nose of a creation seed fae that had survived the calamity of creation. Lin Yuan would need to rack his brains in the future. However, Lin Yuan still had the Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and the Slaughterer Butterfly. Just relying on the Mother of Bloodbath, Endless Summer, and the Slaughterer Butterfly to survive the calamity of creation and harvest the earth vein of creation, Lin Yuan could support at least 3 nomological worlds to continuously improve. It was considered a blessing in misfortune. After storing the princess back into the depths of his soul, Lin Yuan turned to the slaughterer butterfly. Slaughterer butterfly, you'll have to protect the territory's safety in the swamp world during this period of time. I'll let Purple Firmament accompany you in the swamp world. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, the slaughterer butterfly in human form smiled gently and said, "With Purple Firmament around, it's the same wherever I am. My lord, it's not hard for me. I'm just building my home. My lord, it's not hard for me. I'm just building my own home." Upon hearing the slaughterer butterfly's words, Lin Yuan was slightly startled. Then Lin Yuan looked at the slaughterer butterfly with a somewhat strange gaze. It seemed that the slaughterer butterfly had now begun to regard itself as Purple Firmament's wife. It actually said that the swamp world was its home, but it seemed to be the case. Purple Firmament did not let down the slaughterer butterfly's efforts and gentleness to Purple Firmament at all. Perhaps the most beautiful appearance of love was that one's sincerity could be reciprocated. But to be honest, Lin Yuan was still a single dog. However, his contracted phase had already begun to appear in pairs. Therefore, Lin Yuan had to be prepared to be showered with dog food often in the future. But to be honest, this male butterfly, Purple Firmament, could find a creation seed Fae as a wife when it was at bronze. It was simply too awesome. Purple Firmament was definitely a model for butterfly species phase. Killer butterfly, if you have the time, try to communicate with the swamp water moss. Let the marsh moss spread out a large area of defense green carpet, and use the probing ability of the innate talent to scout the surroundings of the territory. This way we can also give an early warning when danger comes. If you encounter a situation like today again, you can ask Purple Firmament, who is in the swamp world, to fly back to the Spirit Lock spatial zone to inform me. I'll think of a way to provide support as soon as I receive the notification. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, the slaughterer sky butterfly nodded and replied, "That's right. All right. My lord just gave me a lot of earth elemental heavenly mating grade pearls. I will use these pure earth elements to recover my depleted bloodline and break through to the monarch rank as soon as possible. This way, even if a level 11 blessed serpent vulture comes, I'll be able to deal with it in time. Wendy and Shiteng won't get hurt again." Swamp Moss hurriedly expressed his stance. "Sir, even if I have to risk my life, I will protect Lady Wendy's life. My lord, why don't you leave a space on the land for me? I will use the moss to draw a map of the surroundings on this land. It's just that the water in the swamp doesn't flow very fast, so it will take a long time for the tiny moss to drift further." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan turned to look at Shiteng and the Medusa demon Lin Ji, who were happily shaking their 5 heads. Chapter 981. I've prepared a lot of blood that can resist the digestion of carrion-eating fungi. We might as well go and attract some marsh crocodiles immediately. After speaking to Shiteng and the Lin Ji, Lin Yuan spoke to the swamp water moss under his feet. Use the tiny swamp moss to attach to the back of the marsh crocodiles that the Lin Ji controls. Draw a map of the marsh world through the movements of these marsh crocodiles. Then you don't have to worry about the flow speed in the marsh. After giving instructions to the swamp water moss, Lin Yuan gave instructions to Wendy. "Wendy, you have to absorb the poison in the drinking venom snake vulture's heart under the protection of the swamp water moss and increase your strength as soon as possible." Then Lin Yuan leaped onto Shiteng's back and headed toward the marsh at the edge of the land. When they arrived at the edge of the marsh, Lin Yuan found that there were only dozens of marsh crocodiles there. When they saw Shiteng coming, they immediately revealed a fearful expression. However, they still opened their big mouths in the water, looking both defensive and provocative. The Class 6 Medusa Lin Ji finally caught up with Shiteng's speed. After seeing these 30-odd marsh crocodiles, she explained, "After the drinking venom snake vulture discovered me, it used its buzzing to kill all the marsh crocodiles I controlled. Those marsh crocodiles were blown into meat paste. It can be said that the drinking venom snake vulture cleared out the marsh crocodiles at the edge of the marsh. These 30-odd marsh crocodiles should have been attracted by the smell of blood." After saying that, the Medusa snake demon sang the marsh crocodile song. It controlled the 30-odd marsh crocodiles in the marsh. At that moment, the strongest marsh crocodile in the marsh was only Class 6, so it was easily controlled by the Medusa snake demon. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan picked up a bucket of tunnel rat blood that Listen had prepared and poured it into the marsh. As a fae that fed on decaying substances, the tunnel rat's blood had an extremely strong anti-decay ability. When Lin Yuan had been in the Xia region, he had often seen tunnel rats being killed at the garbage collection area. However, if no one cleaned up these killed tunnel rats, they would not rot even if they were piled up for a month. When the tunnel rat blood was poured into the marsh, it mixed with the black water in the marsh and immediately emitted an unpleasant smell. Upon smelling this unpleasant smell, Lin Yuan did not immediately retreat. Instead, he took out 2 more buckets of the tunnel rat's blood and poured it into the swamp. He wanted to see the effects of the 3 buckets of blood. He was really afraid that as a low-grade fae, the smell of the tunnel rat's blood would not be attractive to the marsh crocodile. However, he soon discovered that his worries were unnecessary. The swamp in the distance was already rippling. In just a few minutes, the swamp crocodiles had smelled the blood of the tunnel rats and swam over. An hour later, the Lin Ji spoke softly. "My lord, the number of swamp crocodiles I can control through the swamp crocodile song has reached its limit. If I control more swamp crocodiles, the loyalty of the 1,500 swamp crocodiles under my control will weaken." Lin Yuan nodded upon hearing Lisan's words. Lin Yuan had truly underestimated the attractiveness of blood to the marsh crocodiles. This should also be because the smell of blood in the swamp world would not exist for long under the digestion of the scavenging bacteria. Now that an hour had passed, the blood of the pit rats had mostly been digested by the marsh scavenging fungi. However, the highly developed rot-eating fungi in the swamp had never encountered a bone as hard to chew as the blood of the tunnel rats. After an hour, only 1/5 of the rat's blood had been digested by the scavenging fungi. This meant that the blood of the tunnel rats could last up to 5 hours in the swamp. However, as more and more swamp crocodiles gathered at the shore, he frowned. When the Lin Ji was singing the swamp crocodile song, she had been paying attention to Shi Teng and Lin Yuan's expressions. The Lin Ji immediately said when she saw Lin Yuan frowning, "Sir, why don't you let the 1,500 swamp crocodiles under my control attack the other swamp crocodiles that are attracted by the smell of blood? The marsh crocodile can increase its strength and level by devouring its companions, allowing its body to grow bigger and stronger. Through the swamp crocodiles devouring each other, I can continuously increase the strength of the 1,500 swamp crocodiles that I control. Even if the swamp crocodiles I was controlling were killed by other swamp crocodiles, I could still chant the swamp crocodile's song to quickly replenish them. These marsh crocodiles would eat each other, and the high-level marsh crocodiles would be a good source of food for Lord Shi Teng." Upon hearing the Medusa's words, Lin Yuan suddenly felt that the serpent-haired Medusa was indeed a half-human creature with a snake's body. It was simply vicious. However, this method could indeed increase the defense of the swamp world's outer territory. It could be said that the Lin Ji, who was a believer of Shi Teng's control, had created Lin Yuan's first troop of swamp crocodiles in the swamp world. Lin Yuan threw a face storage box to the Lin Ji and said, "There's a large amount of tunnel rat blood inside. There's a large amount of tunnel rat blood in here. You can choose from it. At the same time, I'll also think of a way to increase your strength as soon as possible so that you can control more swamp crocodiles." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, the Lin Ji immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. This youth in front of her could create an apostle with a wave of his hand, and she was fortunate to be favored by this youth. She was simply too lucky. The arrangements in the swamp world had come to an end, and Lin Yuan returned to the main world. For the past 2 days, Hu Quan had started to select the spirit craftsman slots to head to the swamp world. Lin Yuan also continued to work hard and constantly enhance phase. On one hand, it was to complete the cooperation with Sun Ningxiang and Long Xiao. On the other hand, it was to help Wendy enhance the snake species phase to bronze/legend. Lin Yuan felt a little strange. His blind trade with the flower brocade pearls should have ended. This time he had collected the few aurora pollen on the market. At this time the veteran faction, the Sea of Bliss, should have long been in chaos. However, according to Wen Yu's investigation, the Sea of Bliss was as stable as an old dog. There was no panic at all, and they were still constantly expanding their overseas development. Lin Yuan could be sure that the Sea of Bliss did not have much aurora pollen in reserve. According to the aurora pollen transaction information in the Dew Immortal Garden provided by Sun Ningxiang, the Sea of Bliss had purchased a batch of aurora pollen from the market 6 months ago. Since then they had not purchased even half a kilogram of aurora pollen from the market. This was also the Sea of Bliss' shrewd strategy for collecting aurora pollen. Every 6 months, when the market price of aurora pollen fell to the lowest point, they would purchase in large quantities. This purchase method had saved a lot of money for the Sea of Bliss over the years. As the Sea of Bliss wantonly purchased aurora pollen every 6 months, the price of aurora pollen was bound to rise. The Sea of Bliss could also wait for the aurora pollen's price to fall over the next 6 months. Lin Yuan suddenly thought of a possibility that made him not know whether to laugh or cry. Could it be that the Sea of Bliss had been focusing on a few fisheries in the distant sea and was so slow that it did not notice the change in the Aurora Pollen's market price? Just as Lin Yuan was pondering, his phone suddenly rang. Upon seeing that it was a missed call, Lin Yuan raised his brows. After picking up the call, he heard an apprehensive female voice on the other end of the line. Is this Black? I'm Tian Ningning. Where should we meet? Chapter 982. Before Lin Yuan could speak, Tian Ningning spoke again. It doesn't feel right to go to your house for our first meeting. Why don't we find a place outside to talk first? Upon hearing Tian Ningning's voice, Lin Yuan couldn't help but feel enlightened. For the past 2 days, Lin Yuan had been busy with his own matters, and time had passed very quickly. Whenever Lin Yuan was busy, he wouldn't have a sense of time. As long as he could persevere, he wouldn't rest for a moment. Therefore, Tian Ningning's call made Lin Yuan feel that these 2 days had just passed in an instant. Lin Yuan looked out the window and realized that the royal capital's noon was a sunny day. The breeze under the sun grazed the drifting clouds, which were like thin gauze. Before they could gather into clouds, they would be turned into mist by the sun. The mist surged and turned into drifting clouds, quiet, sweet, and endless. Due to the mountain river Eternal Life Carp's exclusive skill, Place of Life, the return from faraway mansion was always full of vitality and greenery. Upon seeing the sun in front of him, Lin Yuan realized that it was already warm despite being cold. Spring had arrived. Lin Yuan had always wanted to buy a batch of 100 Questions Beasts for Genius to guide and train. Since Tian Ningning wasn't planning to come to the return from faraway mansion directly and was planning to meet outside. In that case, he could also take this opportunity to pick some 100 Questions Beasts. It was almost noon and it was time for lunch. He might as well meet Tian Ningning for lunch outside. Anyway, Lin Yuan wasn't planning to hide anything from Tian Ningning. Apart from his identity as a faction in Sky City, Lin Yuan wasn't planning to hide anything else from Tian Ningning. Rather than asking Tian Ningning to come to the mansion directly, it was better to talk while eating outside. Alright, the Spirit Food Pavilion beside the Tongxi Avenue's Creation Master Association has recently launched an early spring set meal. Many people on Star Web are saying that the Spirit Food Pavilion's new early spring set meal is rather good. Why don't we go there for lunch and talk? When Tian Ningning heard Lin Yuan's words through the phone, she suddenly felt her ears burning. Previously, she had heard Black's voice on Star Web. But now that she had returned to the real world from Star Web, she could hear the youth's magnetic and clear voice through the phone. Tian Ningning felt as if her heart had skipped a beat. As Black's exclusive reporter, Tian Ningning was in charge of Black's external affairs on Star Web. However, Tian Ningning could not deny that there was a long distance between her and Black. Now that she made the call, Tian Ningning felt that the distance between her and Black had been shortened a lot. Tian Ningning had always wanted to know more about Black. Now she finally had the chance. After meeting Black once offline, Tian Ningning felt that she and Black could be considered familiar. At that time, if something really happened and he couldn't contact Black, he could go to Black's place to look for him. He wouldn't have to ask Black to meet him outside like now. Alright. It's a deal then. It just so happens that Star Web has given us plenty of benefits during the new year, and one of them is the Spirit Food Pavilion's discount coupons. Let me treat you to a meal. Upon hearing Tian Ningning's words, Lin Yuan's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. However, Lin Yuan didn't say whether Tian Ningning would treat him. Then let's meet in an hour and a half at the Spirit Food Pavilion on Tongxi Avenue. After making the agreement with Tian Ningning, Lin Yuan hung up the phone. Just as Lin Yuan hung up the call, there was a knock on the door. Lin Yuan opened the door and saw Wenyu standing at the entrance. She was holding a rack filled with clothes. Wenyu staggered a little as she lifted the rack full of clothes and poked her head out of the rack with difficulty. Young master, these are the clothes that I designed with Pinru. These are all designed according to your body shape. I just happened to give them to you. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan hurriedly took the clothes rack from her hand and placed it in the cloakroom area of his room. Looking at the clothes rack that was filled with clothes, Lin Yuan felt that there were at least 20 sets of Spirit Chi clothing. Wenyu said with a smile when she saw him looking at the clothes on the rack. The clothes that Pinru and I designed for young master have been specially tailored, Yizichin said. It's time to change seasons now, so I asked Listen to collect many rare spiritual materials suitable for making Spirit Chi clothing. Pinru and I plan to help everyone prepare clothes for the end of the season before we set up Pinru's home. When the time comes, I'll simplify the clothes I've designed for everyone and save the precious spirit materials. Then I'll be able to put them on the market. Upon hearing her words, Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows. It turned out that the clothes in his hands were all limited edition products of the Home of Pinru brand. After that, most of the clothes that the Home of Taste put into the market were modified from the clothes on the clothes racks. Lin Yuan could truly feel her and Lu Pinru's interest in setting up a clothing brand. Through her enthusiasm, Lin Yuan knew that establishing a clothing brand had always been what she wanted to do. It was just that the affairs of the manor and Sky City were complicated, and many things were handled by Wenyu alone. Wenyu had never had the time to cultivate her personal interests. Now that everything in Sky City was on the right track, Wenyu had a lot of free time. In addition, Lu Pinru was talented in internal affairs, so she could be of great help to Wenyu. This allowed Wenyu to have time to manage the brand with Lu Pinru. Lin Yuan looked at Wenyu, who had a smile on her face. If a clothing brand wants to become famous, the most important thing is to equate this clothing brand with luxury goods. Only when people treat the things you're selling as luxury goods and not ordinary clothes, the clothes you design and create will make everyone scramble for them. Wenyu listened very carefully to Lin Yuan's words. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Wenyu hurriedly said, "Pinru and I have decided to produce some custom-made clothes in addition to mass-producing ready-made clothes. These custom-made clothes will use many rare spirit materials and should be able to reach the standard of luxury goods." Upon hearing Wenyu's words, Lin Yuan shook his head. There's an essential difference between spirit chi clothes and those luxury goods. As long as the luxury goods are valuable enough, there's no need to always change them in the mansion. But spirit chi clothes are different. The core members of the major factions are thinking about how to develop their faction all day long. If they want to develop their faction, they have to do diplomacy. During diplomacy, the major factions have extremely high pursuit and standards for spirit chi clothes. If you want to enhance the brand's prestige, the main target group has to be on these people. Chapter 983. Upon hearing his words, Wenyu revealed a puzzled expression. He did not understand what Lin Yuan meant. Logically speaking, Gao Ding could completely satisfy these people's requests. At that moment, Wenyu heard Lin Yuan speak again. In order to show their status, the members of the major forces usually don't wear the spirit chi clothes for a second time for a long time. They're even afraid that people will think that they're wearing too little clothes. Many members of top forces will never wear the clothes they wore at other social occasions after attending a banquet once. Therefore, no matter how luxurious the custom-made clothes are, they can only be worn once. It's very difficult to attract the members of the major forces to pay for them. Upon hearing his words, Wenyu nodded thoughtfully. As a spirit attendant of the Radiant Moon Palace, Wenyu had a deep understanding of the various major factions. He naturally knew what Lin Yuan was talking about. But Wenyu couldn't think of any way to solve this situation. When Lin Yuan saw that Wenyu still had a contemplative expression, he smiled slightly and said, "That's right. Wenyu, do you know the concept of matching goods?" Wenyu shook her head when she heard the term distribution. She was sure that she had never heard of it before. Just as Wenyu was thinking about what he meant, she heard Lin Yuan explain. If a brand wants to keep customers and make them buy more clothes of this brand, they need to keep attracting customers. It also allows customers to feel a sense of superiority in the process of spending money without feeling any heartache. If we're talking about designing a piece of clothing, this piece of clothing can only be distributed after Pinru's family has bought 10 pieces of haute couture clothing. Then, do you think the consumer will go to the store to buy 10 pieces of haute couture clothing when they want to buy the clothes that need to be matched? Upon hearing that, Wenyu came to a sudden realization. He immediately knew what Lin Yuan was talking about when he mentioned the rationing. Before Wenyu could think about how to design the spirit chi clothing for the distribution, she heard Lin Yuan say, "That's right. When the value of a piece of spirit chi clothing can fully reflect one's identity and is sufficiently precious. Even if you keep wearing this spirit chi clothing, it won't make people feel abrupt. Instead, they will only feel envious. The heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls are rare and expensive spiritual materials. They should be qualified to be used in the design of spirit chi clothing. The consumption of luxury goods has always been based on a sense of superiority. If you want to magnify this sense of superiority, you have to build a chain of contempt. One pearl contains the heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearl of the dreamy cloud lake. The spirit chi clothing required to match it requires 10 custom-made dresses. A set of spirit chi clothing with heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls containing fixed floating life can be reserved for 100 high-order and 10 sets of dreamy cloud lake spiritual chi clothing. When it comes to the heavenly maiden-grade elemental pearls, 5-star weavers can design the color and details of the spirit chi clothing according to the customer's requirements, increasing the customer's sense of participation. Upon hearing that, Wen Yu's eyes lit up. He felt that it was because Lin Yuan hadn't thought of doing a clothing brand. If Lin Yuan had done so, he wouldn't have thought of doing it. Half of the clothes that the major factions people wore to attend banquets were probably ordered from him. At the same time, as someone who was good at allocating supplies, she knew very well that Lin Yuan would have such thoughts and cognition. It was because Lin Yuan had understood the human heart and human nature. Wen Yu hurriedly took out the notebook that she carried with her and started to write. Based on the concept of allocating goods that Lin Yuan had just mentioned, she sorted out the business ideas of the Home of Taste. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan did not disturb her. He reached out and picked out a pure white spirit chi clothing with silver embroidery from the clothes rack that Wen Yu had just brought. Upon seeing this new batch of clothes that Wen Yu had made, Lin Yuan could find that her weaver ability had unknowingly greatly improved. The silver embroidery on it was made of the silk thread spat out by the diamond fay, the smooth silk silver silkworm. The silk thread spat out by the smooth silk silver silkworm was almost weightless. In a windless environment, the smooth silk silkworm's silk thread was so light that it could stay in the air for a minute. It was very difficult for ordinary Class 3 weavers to use such silk thread to embroider. Lin Yuan remembered that when Wen Yu had first made the spirit chi clothing for him, she had just broken through to Class 3 weaver. Right now, Wen Yu's weaver ability was at least advanced rank 3. Lin Yuan put on this pure white spirit chi clothing with silver embroidery and used his spiritual energy to communicate with Blackie. Blackie circled and came to Lin Yuan's window. Lin Yuan jumped down from the window and landed firmly on Blackie's back. Blackie immediately took Lin Yuan to Tongxi Street. The main street of Tongxi Street had the Spirit Food Pavilion and the Creation Master Association. The old alley behind the main street had row after row of shops of various colors. There were all kinds of stores and there were naturally fays that were sold. Lin Yuan planned to choose the 100 Questions Beast from these shops. Lin Yuan might have announced his identity as the Moon Empress disciple at the Nix Assembly. However, news from the Nix Assembly, especially news involving the Moon Empress disciple, would not spread. Therefore, Lin Yuan did not have to worry that someone would recognize his identity as the Moon Empress disciple. However, Lin Yuan had been in the limelight at the All-Star competition, so he would often receive sidelong glances while riding on Blackie's back. Lin Yuan even encountered 2 female spirit chi professionals riding on flying-type fays that wanted to stop him just to leave his contact information and get his signature. Such situations were common for the Radiance 100 Sequence members and the members of the B and A Guild clubs. However, Lin Yuan still found it hard to adapt. The flying-type fays in the royal capital were definitely superior to the 36 major cities. However, it was still rare to see someone riding on a fantasy breed fay in the royal capital. Moreover, Lin Yuan was riding on a pure-blooded flood dragon fay. During the S tournament, Lin Yuan had only waved his hand to release a red light to win the duel. Many people were guessing what Lin Yuan's fay was. This flood dragon obviously could not release that red light, so it was definitely not the fay that Lin Yuan had used in the All-Star competition. This pure black flood dragon fay had become a fantasy breed at gold, so it was definitely not a flying-type fay that was used as a mode of transportation. Instead, it was a fay that Lin Yuan had already contracted. Many passers-by used their cell phones to take pictures of Lin Yuan riding on Blackie. They were going to post it on his personal space on Star Web. This would allow his personal space to receive more attention and some likes. Chapter 984. When Lin Yuan arrived at the entrance of Tongxi Street, he asked Blackie to stop. When he landed on the ground with a flip, he discovered that there was a row of peddlers selling plum branches and flower boxes at the entrance of Tongxi Street. Plum branches could be used to make honey, sweet soup, flour cakes, and even spices. They were considered a very economical species among floral fays. However, most of the plum fays only bloomed in winter, and the plum flowers would wither in a few days when the weather turned warm. The plum branches could only be sold for 7 or 8 days. Therefore, the plum branches were being sold at an extremely cheap price, and all the hawkers were offering unimaginable discounts. In the past, the weather in the Xia region was hot all year round, and there were no plum branches to buy. Otherwise, even if Lin Yuan had to buy these plum branches when he was at his poorest, he wouldn't feel the slightest heartache. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard a boorish voice roaring. "Kid, if you continue to be like this, it won't be as simple as a scolding. We're all selling plum branches here. We've agreed on a price of 15 federal coins per branch. Everyone has bundles of plum branches that they haven't sold. Why are you lowering the price to 14 Federation dollars per branch? Upon hearing this voice, Lin Yuan turned around and saw a tall and skinny man scolding a 12 or 13-year-old youth with an extremely dissatisfied tone. If the youth didn't have his head lowered and didn't say a word, the tall and skinny man would have given him a slap. Unlike the tall and skinny man's angry roar, the youth just lowered his head and pulled at a corner of his patched clothes while looking at the ground. He was trying hard not to cry. Upon seeing this scene, Lin Yuan frowned tightly. 6 or 7 years ago, when he was the same age as this youth, he had also sold usnias by the roadside. At that time, in order to raise money to treat Chu Xi's high fever, he had changed the price of 1 usnia for 5 Federation dollars to 3 for 10. When he had just changed the price, he had immediately been educated by the other hawkers. It was exactly the same as the current youth. It couldn't be said that the tall and skinny man was completely wrong. Many of the peddlers sold plum branches at the same time. They earned their hard-earned money to feed their families. The youth's actions were equivalent to cutting off other people's source of income. A place where many hawkers gathered to sell a single spiritual ingredient would usually have their own rules. In order to maintain order, you need to ensure that everyone sells the phase at the same price. As for whether or not it could be sold, it all depended on one's own ability. 15 federal coins per plum branch was already very cheap. Under such circumstances, the young man still continued to lower the price. Clearly, he had a reason for wanting money. It could be said that for a youth of his age to come out and sell plum branches, he was already at his wits' end. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan walked forward and looked at the helpless youth who had his head lowered and was tugging at the corner of his clothes. He gently squatted down. Just as Lin Yuan was about to reach out and rub the young man's hair, he found that the youth's eyes were already filled with a bean-sized teardrop that could fall at any time. Lin Yuan hurriedly took out a tissue and handed it to the youth. A plum branch is 15 federal coins each, right? I want some more plum branches. When the young man saw that someone had suddenly comforted him and handed him a tissue, he wanted to reach out to take it. But when he saw the gold-plated print on the pure white paper towel, the young man quickly retracted his hand. This kind of gold-plated paper towel was made of real gold, and it was obvious that it was extremely expensive. When the young man looked at the paper towel, he felt that even if he sold all the plum branches in his flower basket, he wouldn't be able to afford this gold-plated paper towel. Upon seeing the young man's expression, Lin Yuan immediately picked up the paper towel and gently wiped the corner of the young man's eyes. The young man seemed to have never felt kindness from a stranger before. When a stranger suddenly treated him so well, he got nervous instead. He lifted his head and blinked his big watery eyes while looking at Lin Yuan timidly. "Big brother, thank you. Big brother, how many plum branches do you want? Before I came out, my big brother had soaked them in ice water. They are all very fresh and they can be kept for at least 2 days at home." When Lin Yuan heard the young man's timid promotion, he lowered his head and looked at the plum branches in the young man's flower basket. He noticed that the plum branches in the flower basket were very beautiful and stiff. Occasionally there would be a few plum petals with water droplets. In order to achieve such a state, the plum branches would need to be soaked in ice water for at least 3 hours. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard a rough and warm voice beside his ear. "Young master, I also have plum branches here. Do you want to?" Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan raised his head and looked at the tall and thin man in front of him. "All right, I will take all of your plum branches. I can go back to make some plum blossom pancakes and plum blossom honey." The rough man's behavior might have made Lin Yuan frown, but under such circumstances, the rough man's behavior could be considered as good intentions. Otherwise, the rough man wouldn't have needed to say so much to the young man. He would just have to chase the young man out according to the rules of this area. In that case, the young man wouldn't be able to set up a stall here because he had broken the rules. It would more or less reduce the tall and thin man's competition. If the tall and thin man did that, the young man was destined to not earn a single cent today. During this season, as long as there was a day's delay, it was unknown how many plum branches would wither and wither. When the young man heard Lin Yuan's words, his face immediately revealed a joyful expression. However, he recalled that he had close to 300 plum branches in this flower basket. "It doesn't cost so much to make flower cakes and plum blossom honey," the teenager said timidly. "Big brother, if you're only making plum blossom honey, you shouldn't need so many plum branches. If big brother lives nearby, you can give me an address. Every morning I can cut fresh plum branches and send them to big brother." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan rubbed the youth's hair and stood up. "Big brother, there are many people at home. These plum branches won't be wasted." After speaking, Lin Yuan gave the youth an address. The address was the Fey Observer Guild, which wasn't far from here. After handing over the address to the youth, Lin Yuan immediately said, "That's right. If there are more plum branches in the next few days, as long as you can carry them, send 500 to this address before 9 o'clock every morning. When the time comes, an auntie will take the plum branches from you and give you money." After saying that, Lin Yuan took out the amber button-shaped diamond Fey storage box that had not been used for a long time and paid the tall, thin man and the youth. He also paid the youth the price of 500 caddies of plum branches tomorrow morning. Just by seeing that the youth was selling the plum branches that he had painstakingly planted at such a low price, Lin Yuan knew that the youth had some unspeakable difficulties. Chapter 985. Help the needy, not the needy. According to the current weather and temperature, the plum branches should be able to be sold for another week or so. According to the price of 15 Federation dollars each, almost 5,000 plum branches could be sold for around 75,000 Federation dollars. He hoped that 75,000 Federation dollars would be able to help this 12 or 13-year-old youth in front of him. The youth took the Federation dollars from Lin Yuan, and his eyes, which were a little dusty due to the pressure of life, immediately flashed with a clear light. The youth's somewhat cracked lips quietly curved up, and he said with hope and surprise, "Big brother finally doesn't have to suffer this month. Brother, you don't have to suffer anymore this month. You can finally drink medicine once every 2 days." Previously, Lin Yuan had heard this youth mention that he had an older brother who would use ice water to soak the plum branches. Lin Yuan was also an older brother, and Lin Yuan had thought that as an older brother, how could he let his younger brother go out to sell plum branches? He didn't expect this youth to sell plum branches to treat his older brother's illness. The youth took the money and carried the empty flower basket on his back. He quickly ran toward the alley of Shitong Street, and his entire body was filled with youthful vitality. The tall and skinny man had been observing Lin Yuan ever since he arrived. Just by looking at the silver-embroidered crane shadow and mist on Lin Yuan's spirit chi clothes, as well as the gold-stamped paper towel that he had just handed over, the tall and skinny man knew that Lin Yuan's identity was definitely not ordinary, and he wasn't even on the same level as people like him. However, the tall and skinny man couldn't tell exactly what level Lin Yuan was at. The tall and skinny man had been selling spiritual ingredients on Shitong Street for a living, and he had seen many young masters from wealthy families. Among them there were even young masters from rising factions. However, compared to those young masters from wealthy families, Lin Yuan gave the tall and skinny man a completely different feeling. His noble aura carried calmness, and the curve of his mouth would involuntarily make people feel intimate. When the tall and skinny man saw Lin Yuan's gaze looking in the direction that the youth left, he hurriedly said, "Ayu's older brother contracted a strange disease last summer. Ayu's brother contracted a strange disease last summer. 2 years ago, the parents of the 2 children met a forest dire wolf when they went to the endless forest to dig for black-shelled vegetables. Say, if the old couple knew that they would die in the mouth of the forest dire wolf, they definitely wouldn't have chosen to adopt these 2 children. After Lan contracted a strange disease, he can't be seen at all. Only Ayu is supporting them. I reckon that their Fey store won't be able to operate for much longer." Just as the rugged man finished sighing, he realized that the noble-looking young man who had been standing beside him had already left. Lin Yuan walked toward the alley that the youth had just run into. Tongxi Street could be considered an old street in the royal capital. There were many old alleys on Tongxi Street that had existed for hundreds of years. These old alleys were all single-room houses with front and backyards. At this time, every small house in the old alley was usually a shop. The small houses, which were also the shops, were close to each other, and it was filled with a very lively atmosphere. As soon as he turned into the alley, he saw a few large steamers in front of a small house's courtyard. There was a charcoal fire in the steamer, and steam rose from the steamer, bringing with it the smell of barbecued blackback mountain boar. When he smelled this scent, he felt a little hungry. He wanted to immediately go forward and buy some barbecued pork to eat. However, when Lin Yuan thought about going to the Spirit Food Pavilion for a meal with Tian Ningning, he gave up on the idea of buying barbecued blackback mountain boar. The path in the alley wasn't as easy to walk as the main path of Tongxi Street. If one were to run quickly on the path in the alley, the gravel path in the alley would definitely bring up dust. However, when walking on such a path, Lin Yuan felt his heart was familiar and steady. When Lin Yuan had taken out the Federation dollars from the amber button-shaped diamond Fey storage box, he felt a little enlightened. In Lin Yuan's memory, he had used Radiance dollars to purchase things for a long time. It had been a long time since he had used Federation dollars. Today, when he came to the old alley, he had suddenly stepped into the mortal world from the fairyland-like return from faraway mansion. The mountains and rivers were vast, and the mortal world was filled with smoke and fire. The hustle and bustle in his ears and the smoke and fire in front of him made Lin Yuan feel that formless things were the most free. Just as Lin Yuan was having this realization, his spiritual energy suddenly shook. A willpower rune that was formed by the constantly changing air currents appeared in Lin Yuan's mind. Lin Yuan didn't expect that he would actually comprehend another willpower rune unknowingly. Lin Yuan now had 2 willpower runes in his mind that he hadn't had time to use yet. One of them was the willpower rune that Lin Yuan had comprehended from the extreme massacre. This willpower rune was the first willpower rune that Lin Yuan had comprehended, and it had been gathering dust in his mind for a long time. The other willpower rune was this one. It was formless and filled with the aura of freedom. Lin Yuan still didn't have a clue as to what phase were suitable for the 2 idle willpower runes in his mind. As a spirit chi professional, Lin Yuan couldn't casually contract a fey just to use the willpower rune. After each different fey was contracted, it had to be able to perfect Lin Yuan's combat system. Lin Yuan felt that when he was free he should properly think about what kind of phase his combat system was still lacking to make up for it. After returning to his senses from the realization, Lin Yuan couldn't help but recall what the rough, tall and thin man had just said. When Lin Yuan saw that 12 or 13 years old youth called Ayu selling spiritual ingredients outside, he thought of himself. Lin Yuan was indeed moved by compassion, but he didn't expect that this youth and his elder brother's situation would be so similar to his and Chu Si's. It was because the elder brother had a problem with his body and opened a fey store. His parents were also dead. However, he and Chu Si were different from this pair of brothers in that they were indeed born from the wombs of their parents. However, this pair of brothers were adopted. Lin Yuan found it hard to imagine that the circumstances of different people would actually almost faintly overlap. At the same time, a trace of doubt arose in Lin Yuan's heart. The rough man said that Ayu's elder brother had a strange illness that couldn't be seen in public. This illness was really too strange. In the era of the Spirit Chi awakening, it sounded a little sad that ordinary people couldn't become Spirit Chi professionals. However, these ordinary people were also lucky. In the era of the Spirit Chi awakening, ordinary people could breathe Spirit Chi and eat spiritual ingredients that contained spiritual power. As long as they didn't have some serious illness, it was very difficult for them to lose their lives. At the same time, after the Spirit Chi awakening, many strange illnesses before the Spirit Chi awakening had disappeared. The first one was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 986. Speaking of photophobia, many of the severely injured or newly born dark-type fays were very sensitive to light. This sensitivity wasn't reflected in the photophobia. Instead, purebred dark-type fays would be quickly scorched by the intense sunlight, resulting in injuries. Due to prolonged exposure to sunlight, their roots would be damaged. Only when purebred dark-type fays matured to a certain extent would they be able to fearlessly expose themselves to sunlight. However, even if purebred dark-type fays could be exposed to sunlight, they would still have a strong aversion to being exposed to sunlight. Lin Yuan shook his head and quickly tossed this absurd thought out of his mind. How could a human be a purebred dark-type fey? A purebred dark-type fey would need to reach Myth 2 to transform into a human form. Even if a Myth 2 fey was on the verge of death, it wouldn't be afraid of sunlight. When the first fey store appeared in the alley, Lin Yuan summoned Genius and said, "Genius, you can choose your students later." After hearing Lin Yuan's words, Genius happily swayed its 5 fluffy tails and brushed against Lin Yuan's arm. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Genius happily swayed its 5 fluffy tails. Its tails brushed against Lin Yuan's arm as it spoke in a childish voice. Lin Yuan, Genius doesn't have any requirements for its students. Compared to the 100 Questions beasts with perfect bodies, Genius is more interested in accepting the 100 Questions beasts with flaws as its students. Those 100 Questions beasts with perfect bodies would be able to find their masters quickly. However, those with flaws wouldn't have a chance to find their masters. Genius then added softly, they wouldn't even have food to eat. Genius clearly recalled its experience before meeting Lin Yuan. After recalling that experience, Genius immediately scuttled from Lin Yuan's embrace to Lin Yuan's shoulder. After recalling that experience, Genius immediately scuttled from Lin Yuan's embrace and onto Lin Yuan's shoulder. It used its snow-white face to rub against Lin Yuan's cheek and meowed. Lin Yuan frowned as soon as he walked into the courtyard in front of him. This pungent smell was like the smell of feces piled up and fermented after a long period of time. When Genius smelled this smell, it twitched its nose and whispered into Lin Yuan's ear. Lin Yuan, genius doesn't smell any 100 questions beasts here. There shouldn't be any 100 questions beasts for sale here. There shouldn't be any 100 questions beasts for sale here. When Lin Yuan heard genius words, he stopped in his tracks. At this moment, an uncle walked out of the shop. The uncle was holding a gunny sack in disgust. Dark brown liquid dripped from the sack onto the ground from time to time. When the burly man came out with the sack, Lin Yuan's nose was filled with the smell of feces. Lin Yuan knew that this burly man should have just cleaned up the Fei's excrement in the store at noon. When Lin Yuan had opened the Fei store, apart from Genius and Chimey, he had only raised plant species Feis. There weren't any animal Feis for sale. Animal species Feis were far more expensive than plant species Feis. The reason Lin Yuan didn't sell animal Feis was because his body didn't allow it at that time. He couldn't do the complicated work every day to serve those animal species Feis. On the other hand, it was also because he was very nostalgic. After raising an animal species Fei for a long time, he would always feel reluctant to sell it. If he sold such ordinary Feis, he would not be able to ensure that they would have a good home. When the burly man saw Lin Yuan, he quickly took a few steps forward and placed the bag in the corner. He then walked in front of Lin Yuan and took a quick look at Lin Yuan's attire. There was also a white blue-eyed kitten with 5 fluffy tails on its shoulder and no strand of hair on its body. "Handsome brother, I wonder what kind of Fei you are looking for in the store? My store has a complete range of Feis. If my store dares to say that it is number 2 in the entire old alley, no other store dares to say that it is number 1. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan replied, "I would like a few 100 questions beasts." When he heard Lin Yuan's reply, the uncle's expression immediately turned awkward. The uncle looked at Lin Yuan with a strange expression and didn't understand why Lin Yuan wanted so many 100 questions beasts. As a housekeeping beast, the 100 questions beast has the same intelligence as a normal person. It is considered the easiest Fei to rear. However, the profit of a 100 questions beast was too low, so no one was willing to rear a 100 questions beast. "Handsome brother, if you want to buy a 100 questions beast, my store doesn't have it. Other stores shouldn't have it either. The 100 questions beast can only be bought at the Fei wholesale market. You can choose from tens of thousands of 100 questions beasts at the comprehension wholesale market." The uncle suddenly thought of something and said, "There is a small Fei store at the deepest part of the alley. There is also a small Fei store at the end of the alley. It is now opened by a pair of brothers. There should be a 100 questions beast there. However, the 100 questions beasts inside shouldn't be in good condition. If handsome brother doesn't mind, you can go there to take a look." Lin Yuan nodded and replied, "I don't have a high requirement for the 100 questions beast's condition. I don't have a high requirement for the 100 questions beast's appearance." When Lin Yuan said that he wanted to take a look, the uncle quickly said, "It just so happens that my wife is in the store. It just so happens that my wife is in the shop right now. It's not easy to find the 2 brothers' shop. I'll send you there on the way." The 2 brothers' elder brother is suffering from a strange illness and is rather weak when speaking. However, there is definitely no problem with the items in that store. After hearing the uncle's words, Lin Yuan immediately knew that the store should be the one that the youth called Ayu was at. When the uncle heard that Lin Yuan wanted to buy a 100 questions beast, he eagerly wanted to pull Lin Yuan over. He was even more attentive than the store that sold his own Fei. However, he also wanted to help the 2 brothers in the store. This made Lin Yuan involuntarily think of Auntie Zhang and Uncle Li who had taken care of him. In this world there would be a bright sun and a shadow, but even in the shadow there would still be warmth. The warm sun foundation that Chimey and Genius were planning to establish required Lin Yuan to operate. This warm sun foundation had yet to be officially implemented. With Lin Yuan's current ability, the implementation of the warm sun foundation could be simple or difficult. The key was to see how far Lin Yuan was planning to go. Lin Yuan felt that since he wanted to do it, he might as well do it big. The 3 billion radiance dollars that Chimey earned from the live streaming room might seem like a lot, but if he were to implement this warm sun foundation, if he were to distribute the 3 billion radiance dollars to every corner of the Radiance Federation's 32 major cities, it wouldn't be enough. This would require a lot of manpower. At the same time, he would have to open up the channels to the various Fei breeding bases and merchant associations. The second would be even more. End of this chapter. Chapter 987. Among the people Lin Yuan knew, Sun Ningxiang controlled the top faction Du Immortal Garden, and had the majority of plant Feis in the market. As the young patriarch of the Coiled Dragon Valley, Long Tao controlled a huge market share of dragon species Feis and creation master resources. Li Xian came from the Pinnacle faction, Li Cloud Bird niche, which had a huge market share of flying-type phase. Gao Feng was born in the Gao family, a top-notch force. The Gao family vigorously developed deep-sea resources. It had a huge number of aquatic fays. Lin Yuan's current connections weren't enough to cover every fay in the market. However, if the Warm Sun Fund could borrow the power of these top forces, it would undoubtedly be much easier to implement the Warm Sun Fund. He planned to have a good talk with Sun Ningxiang, Gao Feng, Long Tao, Li Xian, and the others when he had the time. The uncle kept talking to Lin Yuan along the way. Lin Yuan was thinking about the Warm Sun Fund, but he basically answered all the uncle's questions. The uncle also recognized Lin Yuan as the youth who had defeated the Barbarian Snake Guild Club's Meng Su during the All-Star match. Along the way they had never stopped praising Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. After sending Lin Yuan to the corner of the alley, the middle-aged man pointed forward and said, "Let's go. Turn inside and walk straight. You'll find that small shop. It's easy to find. I have to go back and clean up the trash in the shop. Otherwise, the old woman will say that I'm lazy when she finds that the shop is not cleaned up after cooking." Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan nodded with a pained expression. The uncle in front of him was indeed lazy, but he was also a good person. When Lin Yuan turned into the alley, he saw the youth named Ayu who had just sold him the plum branches, pouring a basin of water on him. He had also done such a thing before, but that was when the faucet in the bathroom had broken and could not be repaired in time. At that time, the weather in Redbud City was hot, and no matter how many water basins they used, they didn't have to worry about catching a cold. But at this time the royal capital was still warm from the cold. Now that he was holding a basin of water over his body, he might catch a cold if a gust of wind blew. As expected, Ayu, who was wiping his body with a towel, couldn't help but sneeze. At that moment, Ayu also saw Lin Yuan. His eyes lit up and he jogged to Lin Yuan's side. "Big brother, why are you here? Are you going to the store to buy something?" Just as Lin Yuan was about to nod, he heard a weak voice coming from the store. "Xiaoyu, the water basin in the house is missing. Did you take it out? I've already said that the weather hasn't warmed up yet. You'll catch a cold if you keep putting water basins on your body." This voice sounded very weak and lacking in energy. But this weak voice revealed a sense of concern. When Ayu heard his brother's voice, he quickly hid the basin behind him with a smile and shouted into the house. "Brother, there's a customer in the store. It's the big brother who asked me to reserve plum branches today. I'll take the money to buy medicine for you first." Ha 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 ha. Brother's health was the most important. I just want big brother to drink the medicine every day, not every 2 days. I'm not going to school. I want to help my brother in the shop. With that, Ayu jogged out of the alley. Lin Yuan walked into the store and saw a youth slightly younger than him wrapped in a black robe. Only one face could be seen. The youth's face was pale and had a sickly weakness. Even though his body was wrapped in a bulky robe, one could still see the youth's thinness. When the youth saw Lin Yuan, his gaze was a little complicated, with a hint of vigilance and gratitude. Lin Yuan understood the sickly youth's gaze very well. If someone had ordered so many usnea vines from him when he had brought Chu Ci to the Xia region to survive, Lin Yuan would have been vigilant. If that person had rushed to the store, Lin Yuan would have been vigilant. Such vigilance was a thorn that weak life forms had to erect in order to survive. While the youth was looking at Lin Yuan was also sizing him up. Under observation, Lin Yuan felt that the vitality in the youth's body seemed to be being absorbed by something or was brewing something. This was the reason for the youth's weakness. Apart from that, Lin Yuan could not find any other problems. Since it was the consumption of vitality that had caused the youth to be weak, then he would help the youth replenish the vitality. Lin Yuan waved his hand, and a green light shot toward the black-robed youth in front of him. When the black-robed youth saw the green light, he instinctively wanted to dodge. However, Lin Yuan's green light came too quickly, and the youth was too weak to dodge at all. The youth, who was hit by the green light beam, suddenly found that the weakness in his body was constantly disappearing, and his entire body was filled with strength. This feeling of strength was the same as 2 years ago before he had the strange illness. Such an unforeseen event immediately made the black-robed youth reveal a look of joy. Then, the vigilance in the youth's eyes completely disappeared, and he looked at Lin Yuan with gratitude. But at the same time, Lin Yuan's brows were tightly furrowed. The vitality released by the jasmine lily's bud of mountain jade was too much for the youth. Even if the youth was seriously injured and only had one breath left, this green vitality energy beam would quickly heal him. Then the excessive vitality would quickly flow out of the youth's body. However, the youth's body was like a bottomless pit that greedily absorbed the pure vitality that Lin Yuan released. Lin Yuan quietly used Morbius True data and found that there was pure dark energy surging and recovering in the youth's body. At the same time, Lin Yuan could confirm that the youth in front of him was indeed a human. It was Lin Yuan's first time encountering a normal human body that contained a huge amount of pure dark energy. This situation aroused Lin Yuan's curiosity. Previously, the pure dark energy in the youth's body had been in a dormant state, which allowed the youth to survive. Now that Lin Yuan had activated this dark energy, if he stopped the injection of vitality energy, the activated pure dark energy in the youth's body would quickly absorb the youth's existing vitality. The green vitality energy in Lin Yuan's hand continued for a full 5 minutes. Lin Yuan found that the pure dark energy in the black robe youth's body was filled to the extreme, as though it was about to come to life and suddenly disappeared. Then a layer of dark light suddenly ignited under the youth's black robe. This layer of dark light kept spreading up the youth's chest as though it was outlining a strange pattern. This pattern climbed up the youth's neck, and Lin Yuan found that a black pattern outlined the shape of a tail hook appeared on the left side of the youth's face. This tail hook looked a little like a scorpion's tail that was choosing a person to devour. Upon seeing this tail hook's shape, Lin Yuan suddenly widened his eyes, and a guess suddenly appeared in his mind. Then Lin Yuan quickly walked forward and said to the youth, "Can I see what's on your neck?" The black-robed youth was unaware of the changes in his body and only felt that he was finally no longer weak. It just so happened that the black-robed youth wanted to test whether he was afraid of light or not. When the black-robed youth untied his black robe and took off his hat to reveal his neck, Lin Yuan immediately confirmed his guess in his heart. The pattern that appeared on the black-robed youth's body was a beast pattern. Chapter 3 Sad Face. End of this chapter. Chapter 988. The beast pattern was both familiar and unfamiliar to Lin Yuan. Wen Yu's sacred source life form, the Celestial Council, had only brought in 2 members. These 2 members were Bei Su and Yin Lin. Bei Su and Yin Lin had signed contracts with the southern and southern constellations. During the Celestial Stairway Council, Lin Yuan had learned that Yin Lin had awakened 2 beast patterns. Therefore he had done a lot of research on them. Yin Lin had become the Azure Federation's 4th Radiance Envoy with the Lingyan White Lion and Azure Cloud Leopard Beast patterns. Lin Yuan had heard this news from the Moon Empress at the Nyx Assembly, and he had been shocked when he first found out. The Radiance Federation, the Freedom Federation, and the Azure Federation were the 3 most powerful federations in the world. The 3 federations' strength was about the same. Any conflict between 2 federations would shake the entire continent. Yin Lin had become the 4th Azure Envoy and had an extremely noble status in the Azure Federation. Yin Lin had been 1 step ahead of Lin Yuan. The Azure Federation's 12 Class 5 families were the Azure Federation's pillars. In the past, Yin Lin's status in the Azure Federation was slightly inferior to Lin Yuan's status as the Moon Empress disciple. Now that Yin Lin had become the 4th Azure Envoy, her status was still obviously higher than Lin Yuan's. Only when Lin Yuan became a Radiance Envoy would he be on equal footing with Yin Lin. However, due to the Sacred Source Lifeform's relationship with the Celestial Council, Yin Lin was still Lin Yuan's subordinate even as the 4th Azure Envoy. He did not know if Yin Lin had developed a faction in the Azure Federation during this time. The 4th Celestial Council would be held tomorrow night. It had been almost a full month since Yin Lin and Bei Su had entered the Celestial Council and been rescued by Lin Yuan. Therefore, it was time for Lin Yuan to take stock of Yin Lin and Bei Su's gains at the next Celestial Council. At the same time, it was time to release the next phase of Yin Lin and Bei Su's mission. Lin Yuan was not worried about Yin Lin. Previously, Yin Lin's words and actions were supported by the Azure Federation's Class 5 and Class 4 families. Now that Yin Lin had become the 4th Azure Envoy, her words and actions were supported by the entire Azure Federation. With such an identity, Yin Lin could do whatever she wanted without any resistance. But not Bei Su. In a place like the Cave Continent's underground world, Bei Su could only rely on the sharp shadow nether bat that he and Lin Yuan had given him. Speaking of which, Lin Yuan had always had a guess as to why Yin Lin had immediately awakened 2 types of beast patterns after recovering from her blindness. Lin Yuan felt that Yin Lin had awakened 2 beast patterns because of his Jasmine Lily's disconnected exclusive skill. A human spirit chi professional's body was abnormally weak, and the bloodline of a high-grade Fae would cause pressure on the human body. In order to prevent death due to excessive pressure of the bloodline, the high-rank spirit beast bloodline in a human's body would normally be severed from its genetic model when it was young, and it would enter a dormant state. When he had healed Lin's eyes, he had been afraid that they would not heal completely. Thus, he simply injected a huge amount of life energy into Lin. It was very likely that the vitality energy with the exclusive skill, severed connection, allowed Lin's genetic model to merge with the spirit beast bloodline in her body. That was how he awakened the beast mark. Now that he saw Alan's situation, Lin Yuan was certain that his guess was correct. Lin Yuan could not help but be a little speechless. He had comprehended the willpower rune from the Green Mountain that had been burned by the fire and then restored by nature's baptism. It had fused with a very ordinary fae like the Jasmine Lily. It was truly a perfect decision to promote the Jasmine Lily into a fantasy breed. There were so many healing-type spirit chi professionals in the Radiance Federation. Even the Emperor-class healing-type spirit chi professionals had many healing abilities that Lin Yuan could not compare with. However, Lin Yuan really did not find any healing-type spirit chi professionals contracted phase that had the Jasmine Lily's exclusive skill, severed connection. When Alan saw Lin Yuan's eyes staring at his neck, he felt that Lin Yuan's gaze was a little hot. This made Alan feel a little strange as he did not understand what was there to look at on his neck. When Alan lowered his head, he saw the beast pattern that extended from his neck all the way down to his chest. Alan immediately panicked, not understanding how such an inexplicable thing had appeared on his body. When Lin Yuan saw Alan's panicked expression, he explained, "Don't be afraid. This is the wealth that your biological parents left for you in their bloodline. The black pattern that appeared on your neck is a beast pattern. It looks like a purebred dark-type scorpion fae. If you contract a purebred dark-type scorpion fae in the future, this scorpion fae will evolve rapidly through the guidance of your bloodline. At the same time, the speed of increasing strength will be several times faster than when others nurture faes." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Alan's pupils contracted. Ayu did not know that he was not his biological parents, but Alan was very clear about it. Even though his adoptive parents had never personally told him, everyone in this small alley was neighbors. Almost everyone in the alley knew that something had happened to someone's family. When Alan's adoptive parents were still alive, he had heard his neighbors mentioning his background behind his back more than once. At first, Alan did not believe it, but as he grew older, he realized that the older he and Ayu grew, the more different they looked from their adoptive parents. As a youth that was only 16 or 17 years old, Alan did not know why he and his younger brother, Ayu, had been abandoned. Alan knew nothing about why he and his younger brother, Ayu, had been abandoned. It was impossible for Alan to seek confirmation from his adoptive parents. Even if Alan wanted to seek confirmation, his adoptive parents had already died in the mouth of the forest dire wolf. When facing his adoptive parents, Alan would be as filial as his biological parents. When his adoptive parents were still alive, Alan had fulfilled his duty as a child. Although Alan had never expressed his feelings toward his biological parents, he had some resentment in his heart. As a child, he would always want to ask why his parents had abandoned him when he was born. At that moment, Alan's face revealed a trace of loneliness and pain. However, Alan quickly sorted out his emotions and asked Lin Yuan with a trembling voice, "How do you know that this beast pattern was left behind by my biological parents?" After hearing what this noble youth had said, it was obvious that he knew what the beast pattern on his body was. Based on what the noble young man had just said, it was obvious that he knew what the beast mark on his body was. Even if this bit of information was not enough to dispel the doubts in his heart, Alan still wanted to know more about his biological parents. Even if this bit of information was not enough to dispel the doubts in his heart. First more. End of this chapter. Chapter 989. Upon hearing Aaron's words, Lin Yuan knew that Aaron simply did not know what the beast pattern on his body was. That's right, things like beast tattoos belong to the knowledge of 4-star scholars. It was impossible for a youth like Alan, who had been helping his younger brother to maintain the Fae store, to survive to have heard of it. Lin Yuan explained. Your biological parents are either your father or mother. At the very least they are creation breed Faes. This is because only the children of creation breed Faes and humans can have beast patterns. Just as I said, according to your beast pattern, one of your biological parents' original body is this purebred dark element scorpion Fae. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Alan felt as though his worldview had been overturned. Alan had lived for 16 or 17 years, but he had never thought that he would be the child of a Fae. But what exactly was a creation seed? Is it even more powerful than the Faes in my imagination? Upon seeing Aaron's shocked and doubtful expression, Lin Yuan knew that Aaron was abnormally surprised by what he had said. At the same time, there were some things that Alan did not understand. Lin Yuan's thoughts turned and he immediately figured out the key to it. When he had been in Redbud City Xia region, he had only heard of fantasy breed fays. In his understanding, fantasy breed fays were already the strongest existences. The Redbud City Lordess, Ling Xiao, was the one who explained the fantasy breed phase quality to Fantasy V while riding on the Blue Jade Pegasus. At that time he had just learned that there were myth breeds above fantasy breed phase. Lin Yuan explained to Alan. When an ordinary fae fuses with a willpower rune that represents the will of all beings in the world, it will become a fantasy breed fae. When this willpower surpasses everything in the world and condenses into a law, a fantasy breed fae will transform into a myth breed fae. When this law that is above everything in the world evolves into a world from within, a myth breed fae will transform into a creation breed fae. Lin Yuan recalled the painful expression on Alan's face, and his heart stirred. It isn't easy for a fantasy breed fae to give birth to a child. The hardships they have to go through aren't something that ordinary people can imagine. Therefore, since your parents gave birth to you, they would not casually abandon you. They must have abandoned you because they also have a thorny problem that they can't solve. You and Ayu are biological brothers. You are 4 to 5 years older than Ayu, so you should be able to remember things at that age. But you don't have the slightest impression of your biological parents. This means that your biological parents don't want you to be sad because of their departure. They should love you more than they think. After saying that, Lin Yuan pointed at the beast pattern at the end of Alan's scorpion tail. Based on the appearance and tail characteristics of the pure-blooded dark species scorpion fae on the beast pattern, it's likely to be the extreme night jade sky scorpion. A scorpion fae like the extreme night jade scorpion is one of the few scorpion fays that will keep it by its side for nurturing even after it matures. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, the confusion and doubts in Alan's heart instantly turned into tears. Tears welled in her eyes. There were very few people like Lan who knew he was adopted from a young age and kept it a secret. The feeling of suddenly undoing the knot in his heart was very carefree. At the same time it made him grieve and reminisce even more. However, the corners of Alan's mouth curled up slightly as he shed tears. This curl was Alan's heart jumping with joy at the fact that he had once been loved by his biological parents. Alan quickly stretched out his sleeves and wiped his face forcefully. He bowed and thanked Lin Yuan. Young master, my name is Qin Luan. Thank you for everything you have done for me. I don't know how I can repay you. Please let me know. I will do anything for you. Also, can I beg you to help take a look at Ayu in a while? Ayu has also been faintly afraid of light since this month, but the symptoms are very mild. However, my symptoms had also evolved over half a year to the extent that I can't even see the light now. From the moment Lin Yuan entered the store, he had been observing the surrounding environment. The interior of the store might not be big, but it was very tidy. This meant that this youth called Qin Luan was still taking care of the store seriously despite his frail body. Lin Yuan did not say whether he should help Ayu or not. Instead he asked Qin Luan, "Do you have any plans after this? You might not be able to buy a pure dark attribute scorpion fae even if you save for 5 years to open this fae store. Even if you are lucky enough to obtain a pure dark element scorpion fae before the age of 25, its quality will only be able to reach elite. The store's resources are all invested in you. Ayu will definitely be mediocre when he grows up. For spirit chi professionals like you who have awakened beast patterns, your contracted phase can only be suitable for phase of the same attribute and type as the beast pattern fae. Any other phase will be rejected. Furthermore, you have the extreme night jade scorpion's beast pattern on your neck. It's the most suitable fae to form a contract with. A rare fae like the extreme night jade scorpion can only be found in a top faction's Brahma insect cage. Are you willing to not form a contract with an extreme night jade sky scorpion that is compatible with the beast marks?" Lin Yuan had said such words because he fancied Qin Luan's talent. On the other hand, when he saw Qin Luan and Qin Yu, he would think of himself and Chu Ci. Back when he had just obtained Morbius, he had become the Moon Empress disciple. The Moon Empress had always been standing in front of him and silently shielded him. Only then did he have the opportunity to grow rapidly. Now that Qin Luan had the extreme night jade sky scorpion's beast pattern, it was the same as obtaining a new life. If Qin Luan was willing to join Sky City, he could also stand in front of Qin Luan and shield him. When Qin Luan heard his words, he suddenly clenched his fists tightly. "I'm not willing." After gritting his teeth and saying the words "I'm not willing," Qin Luan's clenched fists weakly released. "So what if I'm not willing? Apart from this dilapidated face store, I have nothing. I can't even become a spirit chi professional and form a contract with a fae that I can. Just as Qin Luan suddenly felt that there was no direction ahead, he heard the noble youth standing in front of him say, I have a private faction that has just been established and hasn't had time to develop. I have a private force that has just been established and hasn't had the time to develop. It's called Sky City. Are you willing to join Sky City? Become a member of Sky City? The second part was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 991. Lin Yuan and Gao Feng had eaten in the royal capital's spirit food pavilion before, but they had eaten more casually. Lin Yuan and Gao Feng had booked an ordinary private room and had not booked one of the beautifully decorated VIP lounges in the spirit food pavilion to eat. Along the way, the spirit food pavilion's attendant kept sizing up Lin Yuan. Compared to Lin Yuan's face, the attendant's eyes were more focused on the silver embroidery on Lin Yuan's clothes. After sizing up the silver embroidery for a moment, the attendant's eyes were obviously a little surprised. It was as though he did not expect that someone would choose to use such precious threads from the diamond smooth silver silkworm for a daily spirit chi clothing. The attendant helped Lin Yuan open the Ime Hall's door and bowed to invite him in. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan stepped into the Ime Hall's door. Lin Yuan did not intend to hide his identity from Tian Ningning. He did not let Genius, which was squatting on his shoulder, turn into a silver mask and put it on his face. Since Lin Yuan intended to tell Tian Ningning his identity, he might as well meet Tian Ningning without a mask. Tian Ningning, who was sitting in the Ime Hall, heard a sound coming from the door. Tian Ningning immediately knew that it was Black. The VIP lounges in the Spirit Food Pavilion were designed to prevent the attendants from disturbing the diners when someone entered. Therefore, there was a porch screen set up at the entrance. The porch screen in the Ime Hall was planted with lush plum phase, pearl snow, which firmly blocked the porch screen that could still reveal a person's figure. Tian Ningning had already stood up and walked toward the porch, ready to welcome Black. Tian Ningning's heart was thumping violently. This accelerated heartbeat made her even more nervous than when she had first joined the Star Web and participated in the interview for the Star Web reporter. However, when Tian Ningning arrived at the porch screen and looked over, she saw a handsome and calm youth. A young man with an appearance that made people want to get close to him was walking over from behind the screen at the entrance. The youth clearly saw her, and his brows relaxed as he revealed a bright smile. When Tian Ningning saw the figure at the porch screen, she was stunned. Previously, Tian Ningning had wondered what Black would look like. Previously, Black's eyes were vaguely revealed through the mask, which made Tian Ningning believe that Black was definitely not ugly. As Black's exclusive reporter, Tian Ningning was also Black's #1 fan. Both publicly and privately, Ningning really wanted to know what Black looked like. If the person in front of her had changed his face and walked in, Tian Ningning would not hesitate to shout, "Black, you're here." However, Tian Ningning didn't dare to recognize the face of the person in front of her. Not only did Tian Ningning recognize the face in front of her, but she also had a deep impression of it. A few days ago, it was because of this person in front of him that Black had a negative impact on Star Web. This caused many disciples of the veteran forces and top forces to collectively diss him. This gave quite a number of netizens on Star Web the false impression that Black was very weak. Tian Ningning thought to herself, "Damn. I'm treating Black to a meal, so what is this Lin Yuan doing here?" Tian Ningning, who usually mingled in Black's official fan group and was influenced by Vagabond, had now become a pure-blooded Zuan girl. Just as Tian Ningning was about to say something, she heard a familiar voice. "I've made you wait for a long time. I'm 10 minutes early and not late." Tian Ningning couldn't be more familiar with Black's voice. As Black's exclusive reporter, Tian Ningning could be considered the one with the least work among all the exclusive reporters. Only when Black went to the Star Tower duels would Tian Ningning have the opportunity to write a few duel records. Therefore, during her free time, Tian Ningning would be like those male mothers and would go to the Star Web video library to watch Black's duel videos over and over again. She would then establish discussion forums and fan groups for the phase that Black had revealed. These discussion forums and fan groups had already gathered plenty of fans of Black's phase. Among them, the fae that could create a sea of flowers had the most fans. There were even people who drew a doujinshi picture of the fae that could create a sea of flowers and Black. Tian Ningning simply couldn't bear to look at such a doujinshi picture, but she was honest and secretly saved it. When Tian Ningning heard the voice in her ears, she was certain that it was Black's voice. A rather absurd thought appeared in Tian Ningning's mind. Tian Ningning immediately opened her mouth wide. Lin Yuan saw that Tian Ningning's mouth was like Tan Rant's contracted gluttonous hippopotamus, which could crush 2 pineapples in a single bite. Lin Yuan said with a smile, "Let's go. Let's go in and have a seat before we talk." At that moment, Lin Yuan could already feel that the attendant behind him was looking at him with a rather strange gaze. It was as though he had been brought to the wrong VIP lounge. When Tian Ningning heard Lin Yuan's words, she returned to her senses and looked at Lin Yuan's face with disbelief. "You are? Black." Lin Yuan nodded and walked past the entrance. When the attendant couldn't see him, Lin Yuan spoke to Genius, which was obediently squatting on his shoulder. "Genius, tool transformation." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Genius let out a meow, and immediately turned into a silver mask. Lin Yuan put on the silver mask and turned around to speak to Tian Ningning. Guaranteed to be the real deal. When she saw Lin Yuan wearing the silver mask, a familiar feeling filled Tian Ningning's heart. Even if she couldn't believe it, Tian Ningning was certain that Lin Yuan and Black were the same person. At the same time, Tian Ningning had also resolved a doubt in her heart. It turned out that the silver mask that Black had been wearing was transformed by a fae called Genius with its exclusive skill. While seated at the dining table, Lin Yuan saw that Tian Ningning had a lot of questions and said, "Previously on the Star Web, you told me that you have something to discuss with me. Previously on Star Web, you told me that you also have something to discuss with me. It just so happens that if you have any questions you can ask me directly. I will answer all questions." Even though Tian Ningning was seated at the table, she still felt that her worldview had been impacted. This wasn't the first time Tian Ningning lamented in her heart. Damn it. It turns out that Black and Lin Yuan are the same person. When this thought appeared in her mind, Tian Ningning quickly shook her head. She forced herself to re-evaluate Lin Yuan's image in her heart. She changed San coin to Lin Yuan cow coin. After hearing Lin Yuan say that she could ask any question, Tian Ningning knew that the question she was about to ask was a little stupid. Lin Yuan had already confirmed it earlier, but Tian Ningning still couldn't help but want to ask again. Black is Lin Yuan? No. Lin Yuan is Black? That's not right either. You are both Lin Yuan and Black. The first one is even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 992. When Lin Yuan heard Tian Ningning's incoherent words, he raised his eyebrows. Didn't these 3 sentences mean the same thing? Seeing that Tian Ningning still had doubts, Lin Yuan said, "After becoming a creation master, I used the creation master's privileges to split my identity into a creation master's identity and a combat class spirit chi professional's identity. Black is my identity as a combat class spirit chi professional." After hearing Lin Yuan's words, Tian Ningning immediately understood what was going on. But then Tian Ningning showed a puzzled expression. Wasn't Lin Yuan famous on Star Web because of his duel with the Barbarian Snake Guild Club's Meng Su during the All-Star match? At that time he had not used Black's identity as a combat class spirit chi professional. Tian Ningning found it hard to imagine that Lin Yuan's original identity was a creation master. This also showed that Lin Yuan had not fully revealed his trump card as a combat class spirit chi professional. With that thought, Tian Ningning looked at Lin Yuan and couldn't help but sigh with admiration. Black was already so outstanding. If Black still had a trump card and was also a creation master, Black would definitely be a creation master. Tian Ningning couldn't imagine how outstanding Black was. Originally, Tian Ningning had many questions to ask Black. However, Tian Ningning, who was agitated, had mixed feelings, and all her questions were stuck in her throat. He didn't know what to ask. Lin Yuan and Tian Ningning looked at each other in silence for 20 seconds. Tian Ningning looked like she had something to say but didn't know how to say it. Lin Yuan asked Genius to transform from the silver mask into its main body. Genius let out a meow, and burrowed into Lin Yuan's embrace. Her small head rubbed against Lin Yuan's finger like a spoiled child. Lin Yuan looked at Tian Ningning very seriously and said, "Since you don't have anything to ask me now, I have quite a few things to tell you. First of all, thank you for being my exclusive reporter during this period of time. You have been very busy on Star Web. There are many times when I don't reply in time. I'm sorry. But I can guarantee that as long as I see your message, I will reply immediately. As long as it's a message that I didn't reply to, I didn't see it." Lin Yuan was very sincere to Tian Ningning. On one hand, he wanted to thank Tian Ningning for helping him as his exclusive reporter. On the other hand, he also apologized to Tian Ningning for not being able to contact him due to various reasons. Lin Yuan had already said this on Star Web. But now that he was face to face with Tian Ningning, Lin Yuan felt that there was a need to repeat his words sincerely. When Tian Ningning heard Lin Yuan's words, she felt warmth in her heart. No matter what, Lin Yuan was aware of her efforts. After hearing Lin Yuan's words, Tian Ningning had a lot of questions that she wanted to ask, but they were stuck in her throat. Now that Tian Ningning had received an explanation, she no longer had anything else to ask Lin Yuan. If they asked more questions, they would just be questions about his contracted phase and his future plans. If Tian Ningning asked such a question, it would be equivalent to turning a dinner into an interview. Tian Ningning looked at Lin Yuan and smiled gently. I understand. You've done so many things with just your identity as black. A lot of things are bound to happen when you live with Lin Yuan's identity, so you must be very busy. Tian Ningning recalled that Lin Yuan had ridden a butterfly species Fei to protect Millstone Town under the Class 2 Swamp Dimensional Rift. The same location, the same youth, and two identities had made the same choice with the passage of time. Such a youth would have a radiant luster even when he breathed. Black, can I call you directly if there's anything in the future? Or if there's an emergency, can I look for you at the address you gave me? Lin Yuan nodded and replied, of course. It just so happens that I have something to tell you too. Just as Lin Yuan was about to speak, a crisp bell echoed from Yimei Hall's entrance. This crisp bell was the signal for the Spirit Food Pavilion's attendants to serve the dishes. The crisp sound of the bell was the signal that the Spirit Food Pavilion's attendants were about to bring out the dishes. Soon, 7 attendants entered the room in a single file. He placed 1 main dish, 3 side dishes, 1 cold dish, 1 soup dish and 1 spirit fruit platter on the table. Lin Yuan picked up a bowl and scooped a bowl of cinnamon branch fish head soup for Tian Ningning. Lin Yuan picked up a bowl and scooped a bowl of cinnamon fish head soup for Tian Ningning. I want to deepen the cooperation between us. I don't know what else you are busy with other than being my exclusive reporter? Tian Ningning took the cinnamon branch fish head soup from Lin Yuan and shook her head. Other than being your exclusive reporter, I've already declined all other matters. I'm not busy. I have no problem with any cooperation. Tian Ningning scooped up a spoonful of cinnamon branch fish head soup and said, Black, the cinnamon branch fish head soup here is especially fresh. Last time I came to the Spirit Food Pavilion with the chief editor and the others, I had the cinnamon branch fish head soup once. This cinnamon twig fish head soup is definitely the freshest soup I've ever tasted. As she spoke, Ningning couldn't help but recall what editor Kong Chi had done a few nights ago. She had actually wanted Lin Yuan and Black to duel on Star Tower. The two of them were the same person. There was no possibility of them fighting. It was no wonder the chief editor didn't agree to this matter after communicating with Star Tower. Tian Ningning didn't know that because of Kong Chi's idea, the manager of Star Tower had been summoned by Mystic Moon while sweating profusely. He had been interrogated for 2 hours and he hadn't been released yet. After Lin Yuan scooped a bowl of soup for Tian Ningning, he scooped a small bowl for Genius. Genius placed its little nose in front of the bowl and realized that there was the smell of fish. Genius hurriedly raised its 2 little paws and extended its front paws, placing them on top of the soup bowl as it spoke. Lin Yuan, Genius doesn't want to drink soup that smells like fish. Lin Yuan smiled when he heard Genius' words. He picked up a piece of lychee roasted crispy skinned duck's wing and placed it on a porcelain plate. He then placed the porcelain plate in front of Genius. Lin Yuan then took the bowl of cinnamon branch fish head soup that he had scooped for Genius and took a sip. After taking a sip, Lin Yuan felt that this bowl of cinnamon branch fish head soup wasn't as tasty as Tian Ningning had said. Ever since he had moved to the royal capital, Lin Yuan's meals had always been good. The spiritual ingredients that he had eaten in the mansion had always been gold grade, with silver and platinum as supplements. Just the taste of these high-end spiritual ingredients was enough to make a foodie unable to stop eating. Moreover, there was a master chef like Lu Jie who was making secret recipes. It was needless to mention eating in the Radiant Moon Palace. There was basically no chance for spiritual ingredients below platinum to be served on the table. Basically, every main dish was the most delicious part of a diamond fei. The second dish was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 993. From Tian Ningning's words, Lin Yuan knew that she usually did not come to a place like the Spirit Food Pavilion to eat. He would only be able to eat at the Spirit Food Pavilion once in a while if he had the chance to participate in a Star Web event. Lin Yuan said, Next time I'll treat you to a meal at my place and let you try Lu Jie's fish head soup. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Tian Ningning, who was drinking her fish head soup, asked in surprise. Lu Jie? Is it the Radiance 100 Sequences Lu Jie? And you're living with Lu Jie? Lin Yuan nodded in response. That's right, we live together. This is also what I wanted to talk to you about. We've established a guild club at the place where we live. We want to form a team to participate in this year's S tournament. Would you be interested in becoming our team's reporter? Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Tian Ningning, who was drinking the cinnamon branch fish head soup, choked on the soup. He couldn't help but cover his mouth and turn around to cough for a long time before he could calm down. When he had sent a message on Star Web, Lin Yuan had said that he had something to discuss with him. Tian Ningning was still wondering what was going on. Could he be planning to accept an interview? He had not expected Lin Yuan to give him such a great opportunity. After coughing, Tian Ningning turned around and said with enthusiasm in her eyes, I'm willing. If you are willing to hand over the club's guild to me, let me become the team reporter for the club's guild team. Then I will definitely do my best. Alright. You said that you and Lu Jie are living together, and you've even established a guild club in the same place. Is Lu Jie also a member of the team? Lin Yuan nodded. That's right. Lu Jie is also a member of the club's guild's main force. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Tian Ningning immediately knew that Lin Yuan's team had a high chance of becoming a B-class team this year. Lin Yuan and Lu Jie were in the team with the combat power of the Radiance 100. Even if the rest of the team was a slacker, they would not be able to defeat the Radiance 100. It was not impossible for them to enter the top 16. Moreover, Lin Yuan and Lu Jie could not let their teammates be a bunch of hooligans. Thinking of this, Tian Ningning felt her blood boiling in an instant. At that moment, Tian Ningning heard Lin Yuan speak again. There are still 2 main team members who haven't been confirmed. You probably don't know the remaining one. But there's already a choice for the only remaining spot in the main team. It shouldn't be a problem for me to go and talk about it. The reserve team members are all here. 4 of them are former reserve team members of the Extreme Guild Club: Zhang Xiaobai, Lu Pinru, Tan Ran, and X Aning. The last reserve team member is my younger sister, Chu Ci. When Tian Ningning heard Lin Yuan's words, she felt that Lin Yuan's newly established guild club was not just aiming to become a B-class guild club but one of the S tournament's top 3. Tian Ningning rarely paid attention to news other than Black on Star Web, but she had heard of Chu Ci's name. Previously, many people had compared Black to Chu Ci. They had not expected this prodigy with a bronze/fantasy breed Fae to be Lin Yuan's younger sister. What kind of immortal genes did this family have? Tian Ningning also knew the Extreme Guild Club's reserve team members: Zhang Xiaobai, X Aning, Tan Ran, and Lu Pinru. He also acknowledged the strength of the 4 of them. Even if their Faes were not outstanding among all the S tournament team members, the 4 of them had rich combat experience and were very good at cooperating. At that time, Tian Ningning had been able to become Black's exclusive reporter because of her relationship with Zhang Xiaobai, X Aning, Lu Pinru, and Tan Ran. However, when she heard Lin Yuan's news, Lu Pinru could not help but frown slightly. In the previous season, Zhang Xiaobai, X Aning, and the others had still been in the Extreme Guild Club. In the next season, they had appeared in Lin Yuan's newly established guild club. This situation would make many people think that Lin Yuan's guild club had poached the Extreme Guild Club's people. If the news was reported like this, it was likely to cause some bad repercussions. Therefore, Tian Ningning planned to think of a way to deal with this matter as soon as she became the team's reporter. After sorting out her thoughts, Tian Ningning suddenly wanted to ask about some gossip. That was why so many of the young core members of the veteran factions and top factions had gone to Dis Black on Star Web in order to curry favor with Lin Yuan and speak up for him a few nights ago. Previously, Tian Ningning had always thought that Lin Yuan had taken the initiative to cause this matter. Otherwise, it would not have formed such a large scale. It had to be known that the young core members of the veteran factions and top factions usually kept a very low profile on Star Web and rarely showed their edge. But now that Tian Ningning knew that Lin Yuan and Black were the same person, she understood Lin Yuan's character. She knew that Lin Yuan had definitely not taken the initiative to cause this matter. Putting aside the fact that Lin Yuan was a low-profile person, even if he was abnormally high-profile, there was no need for him to find someone to scold and say that he was weak. Just as Tian Ningning was about to ask Lin Yuan what was going on, she suddenly heard a meow. Then a childish voice said to Lin Yuan, genius wants to eat red braised pork. Then a childish voice said to Lin Yuan, genius wants to eat red braised pork. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan scratched Genius's little nose. Genius, this little gluttonous cat, had finished the lychee roasted crispy skin duck's wings so quickly. Before Lin Yuan could speak, Tian Ningning stood up and said, I'll go outside and order another serving of red braised pork. I'll go outside and order another serving of red braised pork. After saying that, Tian Ningning left Imei Hall through the entrance screen. Lin Yuan did not stop her. In any case, when he entered, he had already bet 10,000 radiance dollars with the attendant. Putting aside the fact that Lin Yuan had money now, even if he did not have money, he would not let Tian Ningning pay for this meal. The floating bamboo hall beside Imei Hall was filled with people. The floating bamboo hall was considered a relatively large hall in the royal capital's spirit food pavilion, and a large table could accommodate 20 to 30 people. At that moment, the floating bamboo hall's table was filled with people, and they were all looking fervently at a fat youth who was holding a cell phone and making a call. The fat youth's face was blooming with a greasy smile. It made one feel as though a large bowl of fat had been forcefully poured into one's mouth. While speaking, the fat youth on the chair subconsciously bowed and constantly spoke words of flattery. His tone revealed an abnormal sense of respect. The fat youth that everyone was looking at did not sit at the main seat in the floating bamboo hall. Instead, he sat at the leftmost seat beside the main seat. Even though there were so many people attending the meal, the dishes had yet to be served. It was obvious that they were waiting for the main seat to come over. After hanging up the phone, the fat youth's greasy smile that was like a chrysanthemum flower was immediately replaced with an arrogant expression. Young Master Miao will be coming over later. I heard that he brought the Zheng family's second young master along this time. When you guys speak later, you have to watch your words. Don't flatter the wrong person. Did everyone want to see a simple and crude face-smacking scene, or a plot with a B-grade face-smacking scene? This book seemed to have only face-smacked once. End of this chapter. Chapter 994. As the saying goes, good news never goes out, but bad news travels 1,000 miles. The news regarding the Class 6 Abyss Dimensional Rift from the Great Night Assembly had yet to spread. However, almost everyone knew that Miao Zhuo had been chased out of the outer palace of Yeong Palace. At this moment, the people sitting in the floating bamboo hall were the disciples of the various rising forces and veteran forces. The disciples of these new and established forces had been hanging out with Miao He. Miao He was a prominent figure among the younger generation of the Miao family, but he had always been suppressed by Miao Zhuo. In the past, these disciples of rising forces and veteran forces who followed Miao He were like mice that had seen a cat when they saw Miao Zhuo. They only dared to avoid him. The disciples of the top forces would only address Miao Zhuo as young Master Miao when they mentioned him. Miao He was also a direct descendant of the Miao family's beast creation garden, but he was not worthy of being called young Master Miao. Even if the core members of the younger generation of the veteran forces were exceptionally polite to Miao He, they only dared to call him second young Master Miao. However, things were different now. Miao Zhuo's status in the Miao family had plummeted. Miao He, who was previously in second place, had no one to suppress him, so his position naturally rose. Today, these lackeys who used to follow Miao He were holding a banquet to congratulate him for standing out in the beast creation garden. A thin-lipped woman at the banquet immediately replied when she heard the fat youth's words. Brother Song, since someone other than young Master Miao is coming later, I might as well go out and ask the waiter to add another chair and serve a few more dishes. Speaking of this, the thin-lipped woman suddenly thought of something and knocked on the wall beside her. The Spirit Food Pavilion has a big and a small VIP lounge. The walls of the adjacent VIP lounges are all made by the entrances. I'll ask the attendants at the Spirit Food Pavilion if they can open up this wall and merge the two halls together. Otherwise, it would be too crowded for so many of us to sit at this big table. In such a crowded environment, even if young Master Miao doesn't say anything, he definitely won't stay for long. The obese young man showed a thoughtful expression when he heard this. He frowned and looked at the woman with thin lips. Do you know who's eating in Imei Hall? Young Master Miao will be here soon. Don't cause any trouble. It'll be ugly when young Master Miao arrives. The woman sneered in disdain. Don't worry. The person eating opposite us should be a Star Web reporter. I saw the Star Web work pass pinned to that person's clothes. There are only 2 bars on the work pass. With such a level of Star Web, even if I were to wait for someone, it wouldn't be any big shot. Heh, this kind of trash even took the discount coupons that the Spirit Food Pavilion gave to Star Web when he booked the VIP lounge. Does this kind of person deserve to eat in the VIP lounge? Eating with this kind of person across the wall not only lowers our status, but it also lowers young Master Miao's status. After that, the thin-lipped woman pulled up the sturdy young man with a slightly sunken nose and said, Dao and I will handle this matter. Now that we've cleared 2 VIP lounges and replaced them with big tables, we can definitely add another 25 dishes. Together with the 41 dishes we ordered before, we'll have 66 dishes. With that, the woman with thin lips pulled the young man with a flat nose and left the floating bamboo hall. After leaving the floating bamboo hall, the young man with a flat nose called De Wu asked the woman who was holding his thin lips. Kai Ching, what you said to Brother Song just now was a bit too much. This isn't any other place but the Spirit Food Pavilion. It's fine to cause trouble in the Spirit Food Pavilion if the other party is weak. If the other party fights with you, you can do whatever you want outside the Spirit Food Pavilion. However, you have to take care of the Spirit Food Pavilion's reputation inside the Spirit Food Pavilion. After speaking, the young man with a flat nose called De Wu wanted to turn around and return to the floating bamboo hall. He didn't want to follow the thin-lipped woman and cause trouble for no reason. When Kai Ching heard De Wu's words, she quickly reached out to grab his sleeve, and her expression became rather charming. Don't. My family has been promoted from a rising faction to a veteran faction for almost 50 years. Even if there is still a gap between us and the top veteran factions, my family started by selling ingredients and has a lot of cooperation with the Royal Capital's Spirit Food Pavilion. There are a total of 3 stewards in the Royal Capital's Spirit Food Pavilion. The one on duty today is my uncle. At that time, this floating bamboo hall was almost booked by that Star Web reporter, and I even snatched it from him. That Star Web reporter didn't dare to cause trouble previously, but as long as our current attitude is tough enough, she still won't dare. Your Wu family has just been promoted from a rising faction to a veteran faction, and your duty is to deal with the dead phase that have been separated from their spiritual ingredients. The Wu family's and our Kai family's duties are somewhat overlapping, but they are not exactly the same. If there is a chance, I can introduce you to my uncle and establish a relationship with the Spirit Food Pavilion. Young Master Miao will also look up to you. De Wu's expression didn't change because of Kai Ching's words. When he glanced at Kai Ching, his eyes were filled with hidden disgust. Even so, De Wu's tone became a little gentler. Kai Ching, I will have to trouble you with this matter. It is a good time to go for an outing at the Emerald Mountain on the outskirts of the Heavenly King capital in spring. Once this matter is settled, I will invite you to the Emerald Mountain for a spring outing. Kai Ching, who was walking, was delighted when she heard De Wu's words. But before Kai Ching could agree, Kai Ching's expression was immediately tainted with a hint of sternness. This was because Kai Ching found Tian Ningning, who had just ordered a honey-braised pork and a pebble python beef at the front desk. Under normal circumstances, Tian Ningning only needed to shake the plum species fei beside her, Pearl Snow, in the Ime Hall. The hanging bell tied to the Pearl Snow would emit a crisp bell to call the waiter over. Tian Ningning had chosen to come to the Spirit Food Pavilion's front desk to order because she wanted to pay. Tian Ningning, who had already taken out her Star Web card, didn't expect that before he entered the Ime Hall, he had already bet 100,000 Radiance dollars at the front desk. Tian Ningning was originally a rather valued newcomer on Star Web. It wasn't a problem for her to write special reports for a month and earn 200 to 300 Radiance dollars. However, after Tian Ningning became Black's exclusive reporter, she no longer wrote special reports and naturally couldn't get the viewing commission for special reports. Black had always been unwilling to accept interviews. Therefore, after becoming Black's exclusive reporter, Tian Ningning's monthly salary was much lower. She had an income of 200 to 300 Radiance dollars per month, but now she had an income of 120 to 120 Radiance dollars. Speaking of which, Tian Ningning's lowest monthly income was less than 100 Radiance dollars. Even so, Tian Ningning's income was considered quite high in the entire Radiance Federation. Tian Ningning was prepared to bleed a lot for today's meal. Before the meal, she had already carefully calculated that it would cost about 550 Radiance dollars. The first one was even more expensive. End of this chapter. Chapter 995. Including the newly ordered honey-braised pork and pebble python beef, the total cost would be around 700 Radiance dollars. This was roughly equivalent to 4 months of Tian Ningning's current salary. Although Tian Ningning felt the pinch of using 4 months' salary to treat Lin Yuan to a meal, she felt that it was worth it. No amount of money could replace the feeling of meeting their idol. Hello, I want to pay with my money. When you leave later, return the 100,000 Radiance dollars to that mister. Hearing Tian Ningning's words, the front desk staff of the Spirit Food Pavilion replied with a polite smile. I'm really sorry, but the Spirit Food Pavilion has set up a rule to prevent people from competing to pay the bill. That is, as long as someone bets money, all expenses will be deducted from the bets. If you really want to pay, you can pay that gentleman after the meal. Hearing this, Tian Ningning scratched her head. He had said that he would treat Lin Yuan to a meal, but Lin Yuan was the one footing the bill. Although she was happy to have her idol pay for her, Tian Ningning still felt that it wasn't right. At this moment, an annoying voice rang in Tian Ningning's ears. I meet you again. Don't you know how to use the hanging bell in the VIP lounge? He even personally came out to order. Since I see you here, it saves me a lot of trouble. When Tian Ningning heard the woman's words, she immediately frowned. Tian Ningning had heard this harsh and disdainful tone not long ago. At that time, Tian Ningning was furious. When Tian Ningning saw Lin Yuan, she finally suppressed the anger in her stomach. Now that Tian Ningning heard the thin-lipped woman speak to her in such a tone, her anger flared up again. Originally, Tian Ningning had a gentle personality, but after she joined Black's official fan club, she became more and more like a gentle person. Under the influence of wandering, she had completely turned into a pure-blooded Zhuan girl. Anyone who dared to speak rudely in front of a pure-blooded Zhuan girl would have to consider how many horses they had and whether they had enough. Just as Tian Ningning was about to subconsciously retort, she recalled Lin Yuan, who was in Yimei Hall. Tian Ningning quickly swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue and said, "Why are you looking for me? Back then you snatched the floating bamboo hall from me. I gave it to you as well. If there's nothing else, I'll go back to my meal." After saying that, Tian Ningning was about to leave. However, Tian Ningning didn't expect the thin-lipped woman in front of her to stop her. "I've also taken the Yimei Hall you booked. Regardless of whether you're eating alone or with a companion, leave immediately." Kai Qing's words immediately made Tian Ningning spit out the words she had swallowed with great difficulty. "Are you taking advantage of your horse? Your horse has been taken, do you know that? How big is your butt? The floating bamboo hall is so big, but it's not enough for you? When you occupied the floating bamboo hall, I didn't want to cause any trouble, so I let you have it. Just how big is your horse face? You still have the face to come and occupy the plum hall? Do you think the Spirit Food Pavilion belongs to you? Did you even leave your horse at the Spirit Food Pavilion?" After saying that, Tian Ningning glared at Kai Qing and turned to the attendant at the front desk. "She said she wants to take over our Yimei Hall. I've only eaten for half an hour since I booked the Yimei Hall. I haven't finished my meal yet. I need the Spirit Food Pavilion to handle this matter." Tian Ningning didn't spend so much money to invite Lin Yuan to the Spirit Food Pavilion just to be bullied. Lin Yuan was still eating in the Yimei Hall, so even if she settled this matter, she wouldn't be able to disturb him. After being bullied over and over again, Tian Ningning couldn't be bothered to put up with it anymore. "How can a stinking old woman like you provoke a pure-blooded Zhuan?" It had been very easy for Kai Qing to snatch the floating bamboo hall from Tian Ningning. He had thought that it would only take a word from him to occupy the Yimei Hall. In the end, just as he opened his mouth, the horse flew away. Tian Ningning's words made Kai Qing feel as though she had entered a horse farm. Her mind was filled with horse neighs, and she didn't know what to say for a moment. Kai Qing usually spoke harshly and had a vicious heart, but he really couldn't handle Tian Ningning, who came and went as she pleased. Kai Qing suddenly raised her voice and roared at Tian Ningning. "Do you know who I am? How dare you speak to me like this?" Tian Ningning rolled her eyes at Kai Qing. "Since you want to say who you are, I happen to be a Star Web reporter. I might be an exclusive reporter, but I also have the authority to write miscellaneous articles. Young lady, please tell me who you are. Let me see how you are so awesome to be able to casually snatch someone's VIP hall in the Spirit Food Pavilion. Do you think your family owns the Spirit Food Pavilion?" When Kai Qing heard the first half of Tian Ningning's words, he wanted to reveal his identity. He wanted to use his identity as a 50-year-old faction to suppress this Class 2-star web reporter in front of him. However, the latter half of Tian Ningning's sentence made Kai Qing unable to say the words that were on the tip of his tongue. Kai Qing's uncle was the Royal Capital Spirit Food Pavilion's manager. Whenever his uncle was on duty at the Spirit Food Pavilion, Kai Qing already felt that the Spirit Food Pavilion belonged to his family. However, the rules of the Spirit Food Pavilion were set by that lord, and his uncle was the manager of the Spirit Food Pavilion. He couldn't defy the rules set by that lord. Therefore, even if Kai Qing called his uncle, he didn't have the authority to chase the guests out of the Yimei Hall. Tian Ningning saw that Kai Qing's face was ashen and cold, and she couldn't say a word. Tian Ningning pursed her lips and said, "The Spirit Food Pavilion doesn't belong to your family. The Spirit Food Pavilion doesn't belong to your family." Who are you trying to impress by whining about it? After speaking, Tian Ningning pushed Kai Qing's arm away and walked in the direction of the Yimei Hall. The man with the flat nose, who was called De Wu, was frowning. However, De Wu didn't glare at Tian Ningning. Instead, he stared at the ashen Kai Qing beside him. Kai Qing had just vowed to the others in the floating bamboo hall that she could merge the floating bamboo hall and the Yimei Hall together. Kai Qing had already said such big words, and he had even called him. If Kai Qing couldn't do it, he would be humiliated like Kai Qing when he returned. Seeing Kai Qing's ashen face, De Wu said, "Young Master Miao is coming. If you didn't mention that the floating bamboo hall and the Yimei Hall couldn't be merged, it wouldn't be a big deal. But since you mentioned it, young Master Miao might hear that you can't even merge a room when your uncle is on duty. Then I'm afraid it won't be possible for young Master Miao to look up to you because of the Spirit Food Pavilion." Kai Qing's face changed drastically when he heard De Wu's words. The second one was even worse. End of this chapter. Chapter 996. Miao. He was no longer second young Master Miao, but the young master of a top faction, the Beast Creation Garden. Being by Miao his side meant that he had the backing of the Miao family's Beast Creation Garden. Therefore, Kai Qing would never allow Miao He to doubt his abilities. Thinking of this, Kai Qing's eyes suddenly revealed a fierce glint. Since this star web reporter in front of him didn't know how to appreciate favors, he just had to turn this VIP lounge incident into a fight. Those who were injured were naturally sent to the infirmary for treatment. In this way, the Plum Blossom Hall was empty. His uncle couldn't go against the rules set by that lord to occupy the VIP lounge, but it wasn't a problem for his uncle to resolve the fight. As Kai Qing channeled his mental power, a nearly 2-meter-long dark green wolf appeared in front of him. After summoning the dark green giant wolf, Kai Qing immediately ordered, "Blunt Wind Wild Wolf, use Boning Wind Blade." Then the giant greenish-black wolf roared. Nearly 20 greenish-black short and thick wind blades gathered around the wild wolf and flew straight at Tian Ningning. Kai Qing's sudden attack completely exceeded Tian Ningning's expectations. Tian Ningning was also a combat class spirit chi professional and had a certain combat strength. However, when facing the sudden attack, Tian Ningning didn't have the time to summon a fey to block the blunt wind wild wolf's bone-scraping wind blade. Tian Ningning suddenly had an idea. She took a step and hid behind a vertical vase that was placed on the wall of the Spirit Food Pavilion as a wall scenery. Then Tian Ningning used all her strength to move the huge vertical vase and put it in front of her. Kai Qing saw that Tian Ningning was using the vase to block the attack. He wanted to tell the blunt wind wild wolf to change the direction of the bone-scraping wind blades. One had to know that the vertical vases in the Spirit Food Pavilion were all luxury items that had been evaluated by the Grace Pavilion. Even if Kai Qing was a disciple of a veteran faction, he would have to pay a large sum of money to compensate for the broken vase. But when she thought of young Master Miao who was about to arrive, Kai Qing couldn't care less. He was willing to pay for the elegant gallery's appraised vertical vase to settle this matter as soon as possible. The Yimei Hall and the floating bamboo hall were connected. While Kai Qing was hesitating, Tian Ningning had already summoned her contracted fey, the crystal-horned buck, behind the vertical vase. The crystal-horned stag was a support-type fey, but its horn could condense the space within a certain range. This allows objects within the space to use spatial energy to resist attacks. As a member of a veteran force, Kai Qing had never thought about how to improve his strength. Even so, Kai Qing's blunt wind wild wolf strength had reached Platinum 3/Legend. Tian Ningning had only contracted one fey, and it was this crystal-horned stag. The crystal-horned stag was upgraded to gold rank 10 by Tian Ningning. The crystal-horned stag was much weaker than the blunted wind wild wolf in terms of quality. It had only reached the perfect quality. Thus, under the blunt wind wild wolf's bone-scraping wind blade, even with the support of the vertical vase and the power of space, the blunt wind wild wolf's bone-scraping wind blade would not be able to withstand it. Tian Ning was still cut in many places. Because the main dishes in the Spirit Food Pavilion were all cooked using deviant flames, the cooking speed had always been extremely fast. At that moment, the pebble python beef that Tian Ningning had ordered was served by the waiter and was ready to be served. The waiter holding the pebble python beef was clearly stunned by the scene before him. Kai Qing saw the cobblestone python beef being served by the waiter. She snatched the tray from the waiter's hand and walked in front of Tian Ningning. "This is the dish you ordered. Finish it before you get lost." Kai Qing poured the cobblestone python beef onto Tian Ningning's body. When the pebble python beef was first served, it was actually not cooked. The beef that was covered with the pebbles was still in a half-raw state. It needed to be slowly roasted on the pebbles that had been heated by the deviant flame. Therefore, the pebbles in the pebble python beef were at least 300 degrees Celsius. Thus, when these pebbles fell on Tian Ningning's wounds, they scalded her and caused her to scream. Kai Qing, who had just made a move on Tian Ningning, didn't even have the pleasure to appear for 3 seconds before he immediately became a little embarrassed. Kai Qing saw that his uncle had already rushed over with young Master Miao. Young Master Miao was accompanied by an arrogant young man. He should be the second young Master Zheng that Brother Song had mentioned on the phone. Miao he had always been suppressed by Miao Zhua and had only just risen in the past few days. It could be said that this was Miao He's most glorious day. However, the only thing that made Miao He a little unhappy was Zheng Kaiyuan's arrogance toward him. Miao He, who had come to the appointment happily, saw the farce in front of him. He first glanced at Dao and Kai Qing, then at Tian Ningning, who was covered in injuries. He frowned and asked the bearded middle-aged man next to him, "Steward Kai, what's going on?" Steward Kai looked at Kai Qing with anger on his face. He didn't expect his niece to get into trouble again while he was on duty. Qing, why did you get into a conflict with someone while you were eating?" Just as Steward Kai finished speaking, many people walked out of the floating bamboo hall's entrance. There was a front desk on every floor of the Spirit Food Pavilion. 4 VIP areas on the 6th floor and above, 1 front desk only served the 2 VIP lounges on the same floor. Therefore, the front desk was not far from the VIP lounges. The sound of the vertical vase breaking was so loud that even the VIP lounge's soundproof door and screen entrances couldn't block it. Originally, this kind of sound wouldn't attract the attention of the rising and veteran forces in the floating bamboo hall, who were waiting for Kai Qing's return. However, the screams that followed the sound of the vase breaking attracted the attention of the younger generation of the rising and veteran forces in the floating bamboo hall. Only then did they open the door to check on the situation. In the end, an awkward scene appeared. The younger generation of the rising and veteran forces in the floating bamboo hall never expected that the sound of the vase breaking and the screams had something to do with Kai Qing, who had gone out to handle some matters. This wasn't the main point. The main point was that young Master Miao had arrived and was frowning. Clearly, young Master Miao was in a very bad mood. This time he probably didn't have any interest in eating. Damn Kai Qing. How could he not even handle such a small matter properly? Tian Ningning was sneakily attacked by Kai Qing and had hot pebbles splashed on her body. If she were an ordinary girl, she would have lost her head and burst into tears. But Tian Ningning didn't. Tian Ningning stared at Kai Qing, then ordered the crystal horned stag through her mind power. The crystal horned stag used all its strength to ram into Kai Qing. Kai Qing did not notice the movements of the crystal horned stag, but the blunted wind wild wolf that Kai Qing summoned did. The blunt wind desolate wolf instinctively activated its skill, Wind Fang Shatter, and bit down on the crystal horned stag's neck. Seeing this, De Wu glanced at Tian Ningning and then flipped his palm. A brown falcon species fey with 4 wings was summoned. This 4-winged falcon species fey set up an earth wall between the crystal horned stag and the blunt wind wild wolf. The crystal horned stag and the blunt wind wild wolf slammed into the mud wall, raising a sandstorm of dust. Upon seeing this, Steward Kai immediately shouted, "Enough!" He pointed at the 2 waiters and said, "Throw out the person who used feys to attack the customers and then detain that crystal horned stag." Just as Steward Kai finished speaking, a voice suddenly rang out. Everyone saw an otherworldly white figure walking out of the Ime Hall. The 3rd night watch would start at 8 a.m. and last for 6 hours. I finally finished writing it. Good night, everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 997. When Tian Ningning had just left, Lin Yuan didn't feel anything was wrong and thought that she was going to order food. Based on Lin Yuan's understanding of Tian Ningning's character, once she found out that he had bet money with the front desk, she would definitely discuss it with the Spirit Food Pavilion's front desk staff. She would definitely discuss with the Spirit Food Pavilion's front desk staff to return the money that he had bet. However, Lin Yuan, who was drinking cinnamon branch fish head soup while waiting for Tian Ningning in the Spirit Food Pavilion, felt that something was wrong after waiting for 5 minutes. Regardless of what Tian Ningning was doing outside the Ime Hall, she should have returned in 5 minutes. However, Lin Yuan wasn't thinking of leaving the Ime Hall to look for Tian Ningning. He thought that Tian Ningning had gone to the toilet. Lin Yuan didn't think that anything bad could happen in a place like the Spirit Food Pavilion. Lin Yuan frowned when he heard the faint cracking sound from outside. He carried genius and prepared to leave the Ime Hall to ask the front desk staff to look for Tian Ningning. Before Lin Yuan could get up, he vaguely heard a scream. Upon hearing this scream, Lin Yuan's expression immediately turned dark. Based on the tone, Lin Yuan could tell that the scream was from Tian Ningning. Lin Yuan pushed open the Yi-Mei Hall's door and walked through the Spirit Food Pavilion's elegantly decorated corridor. He immediately saw Tian Ningning, whose back was facing him and whose clothes had multiple cuts. Even though it was cold and warm, Tian Ningning's physique wasn't considered good. Even though it was early spring, she was still wearing a thick windbreaker made of sheep wool. At that moment, blood was seeping out of the cuts on the thick, camel-colored windbreaker. Tian Ningning was using her hands to cover her arms tightly and was trembling as though she might fall at any moment. Half of her body's camel-colored windbreaker already had many charred brown spots. It looked as though something extremely hot had landed on the camel-colored windbreaker and heated it. Lin Yuan had clearly heard the middle-aged man's words. The middle-aged man had ordered the waiters to throw out the person who had used a fei to attack the customers and to detain the crystal horned stag. It was obvious that the person who had used a fei to attack the customers was Tian Ningning. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and walked forward with a cold expression. Upon hearing the footsteps behind her, Tian Ningning subconsciously turned around and immediately saw Lin Yuan. The instant she saw Lin Yuan, Tian Ningning's eyes, which were red from pain and anger, immediately surged with guilt. He had come out of Yi-Mei Hall to order a meal and encountered this troublesome matter. Now that Lin Yuan had walked out of the Yini Plum Hall, this troublesome matter had also implicated him. As a star web reporter, Tian Ningning naturally had to understand the various famous factions and their core members. Tian Ningning didn't know anyone who wasn't a core disciple of a veteran force like Kai Qing. However, Tian Ningning knew people like Miao He from the Beast Creation Garden of the Miao family, as well as the second young master of the Zheng family, Zheng Kaiyuan, who was a veteran force in Indigo Azure City. Tian Ningning hadn't expected that the person who had tried to kill her previously would have connections with a top force, the Beast Creation Garden. A few days ago, he had been targeted by the younger generation of the various veteran and peak factions. Although Lin Yuan and Black were the same person, it was because of him. Now, Lin Yuan had unknowingly made Lin Yuan go against the younger generation of the top and veteran factions. Upon seeing Tian Ningning's injuries, Lin Yuan waved his hand, and the jasmine lily's heel landed on her. Surging vitality poured into Tian Ningning's body, and her injuries rapidly healed. By using the jasmine lily's heal ability, pure vitality flowed through Tian Ningning's body. Lin Yuan finally knew how severe Tian Ningning's injuries were. Tian Ningning's arm and half of her body had suffered some unknown attack that had caused severe burns. A few of the burns were still on the open wounds. It was hard to imagine what kind of pain Tian Ningning had just endured. The blunt-winged wild wolf had been blocked by the earth elemental wall that Dou had summoned. However, since Kai Qing hadn't issued an order to stop it, the blunt-winged wild wolf, which had a huge demand for blood, was prepared to continue attacking the crystal horned stag. Just as the blunt-winged wild wolf leaped up and pounced at the crystal horned stag with its mouth wide open, Lin Yuan executed Blackie's exclusive skill, Spirit Purity Burst, and punched the blunt-winged wild wolf. After receiving Lin Yuan's punch, the blunt-winged wild wolf crashed into the Spirit Food Pavilion's corridor wall with a loud bang. The frame of an embroidered picture of a pair of butterflies flying through a flowering peony was smashed. The incomparably precious embroidered picture of a pair of butterflies flying through a flowering peony fell to the ground. In the process of falling, the thin embroidered picture was cut open by the fragments of the hanging frame. The blunt-winged wild wolf also fell together with the embroidered picture. At that moment, the blunt-winged wild wolf looked rather strange. It was as though there was a lot of water in its wolf skin. When it landed on the ground, it trembled twice like a ball. Lin Yuan hadn't held back his strength in that blow, so he had killed the Platinum Eye/Legend blunt-winged wild wolf with a single punch. The huge force had stirred all the tissues under the blunt-winged wild wolf's skin into liquid. At the same time, there was another miserable howl. Kai Qing squatted on the ground and held her head, her face pale. The blunt-winged wild wolf was Kai Qing's main contracted fei, and its death had damaged Kai Qing's spiritual energy. Steward Kai's expression was already as gloomy as water. He was extremely displeased with his niece Kai Qing. However, this didn't mean that Steward Kai would allow anyone to kill his niece's fei in front of him. The two attendants who were ordered by Steward Kai earlier did not step forward. Most of the people who worked at the Spirit Food Pavilion had some sort of background, so the waiters didn't want to personally carry out such an obvious bullying request. Now, with the sudden change of events, the two attendants simply stood where they were without moving. When a diner died or their contracted phase died, it was no longer something that an ordinary attendant like him could resolve. Steward Kai stared at Lin Yuan and spoke in a cold voice. If you kill someone else's contracted fey in the spirit food pavilion, you will have to pay the price of blood. When Lin Yuan heard Steward Kai's words, he acted as though he didn't hear anything. He didn't even spare a trace of his gaze on Steward Kai, the rising factions, veteran factions, and the current number one of the Beast Creation Garden's younger generation, Miao He. Lin Yuan said softly to Tian Ningning, "Don't be afraid. I'm here for everything." When Tian Ningning, who had always been very strong, heard Lin Yuan's words, her tears fell like a broken necklace. Chapter 998. Tian Ningning, who had been raising her head stubbornly like a wolf cub, was, after all, a girl in her 20s. In his heart he was already terrified. When the rising and veteran factions' disciples saw that Lin Yuan had killed Kai Qing's fey, they immediately entered a stupefied state. They then looked at Lin Yuan as though they were watching a good show. They wanted to see how Steward Kai would handle this matter. However, Miao He and Zheng Kaiyuan, who were standing beside Steward Kai, broke out in cold sweat. Miao Zhua's soul had been injured by Zhuaming's world power because of Lin Yuan, and he had been chased out of the Night Palace's outer palace. The Miao families Miao Zhua and Miao Qi had been chased out of the Nix assembly and had not personally seen Lin Yuan standing beside the Moon Empress in the moonlight regal robe. However, he had also learned from Zheng Kaiyuan and the other top factions that he had worked with that Lin Yuan, who had shown brilliantly in the S tournament, was the Moon Empress disciple. Miao He was grateful to Lin Yuan from the bottom of his heart. If it wasn't for Lin Yuan, he would still be pressed down by Miao Zhua. However, it seemed like he had unknowingly offended the Moon Empress disciple. Even if he didn't do anything, Kai Qing and the others had attacked Tian Ningning in the Spirit Food Pavilion because they wanted to treat him to a meal. Therefore, no matter what he did, he would not be able to clear his name. He would definitely be the scapegoat. Suddenly, Miao He thought of Zheng Kaiyuan, who was beside him. For the past few days, Zheng Kaiyuan had been treating himself as a friend of the Moon Empress disciple and had received great attention from his grandfather. There was also the phone number of the Moon Empress disciple. Thinking of this, Miao He bumped Zheng Kaiyuan with his shoulder without leaving a trace. He used his eyes to convey his meaning. "Don't you know the Moon Empress disciple? Why don't you hurry up and say something?" Zheng Kaiyuan felt even more guilty after being hit by Miao He. Zheng Kaiyuan was still a little confused about how he had gotten Lin Yuan's phone number. However, Zheng Kaiyuan understood that he couldn't retreat at this moment no matter what. Otherwise, even if Miao He took the blame, the Miao family would also know that he was not close to Lin Yuan. He thought about what he had done in the past few days as well as his mother, who was about to arrive at the Miao family in high spirits. Zheng Kaiyuan had no choice but to pluck up his courage and take a step forward. He cautiously and respectfully said, "Master Lin, you're also eating at the Spirit Food Pavilion. I've just arrived. I didn't expect to see you here." When Lin Yuan heard someone talking to him, he shifted his gaze away from Tian Ningning. He glared fiercely at the young masters of the major factions and Zheng Kaiyuan. When everyone saw Lin Yuan's sharp gaze, they felt their hearts tighten. Zheng Kaiyuan, who took a few steps forward, and Miao He, who was standing beside caretaker Kai, felt as though they were standing on the tip of a knife. Every time Lin Yuan looked at her, she felt as though there were thousands of sharp thorns stabbing at her from all directions, wanting to stab her into a bottomless abyss. However, Lin Yuan didn't respond to Zheng Kaiyuan's words. He just tilted his head and looked at Steward Kai coldly. "I don't know what kind of price the Spirit Food Pavilion has to pay to kill someone else's contracted fey. If I really have to pay a price, I can go to the Kitchen Incense Palace to ask for Lord Chef Supreme's forgiveness. But this blunt-wind desolate wolf wants to kill my friend's fey. This blunt-wind desolate wolf deserves death." The first half of Lin Yuan's statement infuriated Steward Kai, causing him to reveal a sneer. He was prepared to inform the Spirit Food Pavilion's bodyguards to make a move on Lin Yuan. However, the second half of Lin Yuan's statement caused Steward Kai's eyes to widen. He thought he had misheard. Did this youth say that he was going to personally go to the Kitchen Incense Palace to ask for Lord Chef Supreme's forgiveness? What kind of place was the Kitchen Incense Palace? Was the Kitchen Fragrance Palace a place that anyone could enter? Even if he could enter the Kitchen Incense Palace, how could he meet the Class 5 Creation Master, Lord Chef Supreme? However, Steward Kai immediately thought of how Zheng Kaiyuan addressed Lin Yuan. Zheng Kaiyuan addressed him as Lord. Steward Kai suddenly looked at Miao He's face when he thought of this. Steward Kai noticed that Miao He had a bitter expression, and there was a thin layer of sweat on his forehead. When Steward Kai saw the situation, he silently cursed in his heart. Even though Miao He had been suppressed by Miao Zhuo to the point where he couldn't turn the tables, he was still abnormally overbearing when handling matters. He was someone who looked down on everyone. The expression on Miao He's face was obviously fearful. This kind of fear was like the expression of a cornered blackback mountain boar looking at a ferocious giant tiger. The members of the rising and veteran factions who had been called Big Wu and Big Brother Song by Kai Qing also gasped one after another. They looked at Lin Yuan with a different gaze. They were secretly guessing Lin Yuan's identity. After all, the younger generation of these rising and non-top veteran factions didn't have the qualifications to inquire about the situation of the Dark Knight General Assembly. Naturally, they couldn't know Lin Yuan's identity. At the same time, Big Wu had secretly cursed Kai Qing over 100 times in his heart. Big Wu remembered that Kai Qing had sworn that the person in Yi Hall was just a Class 2-star web reporter and couldn't possibly know any big shots. In the end, this person that Kai Qing said couldn't possibly be any big shot could actually go to the Kitchen Incense Palace to personally apologize to Lord Chef Supreme. This was simply a connection between the heavens and the earth. It could even be said that he was completely on the same side as the Kitchen Incense Palace. Lin Yuan withdrew his gaze and looked at Tian Ningning. What happened just now? How did you get hurt like this? Tian Ningning originally didn't want to disturb Lin Yuan, but now that Lin Yuan already knew. Thus, Tian Ningning told her the whole story in detail. The other side asked us to get out of Yi Hall. They want to connect Yi Hall and Floating Bamboo Hall together to invite some big shot. My injuries were first caused by the Blunt Wind Wild Wolf's ability, and then someone put a plate of pebble python beef on my wounds. Hearing Tian Ningning's brief account, Lin Yuan's expression became even gloomier. The corner of his mouth, which had always been gentle, couldn't help but hang a trace of a sneer. At the same time as Tian Ningning's account, Miao He and Zheng Kaiyuan also had ugly expressions. This was because Miao He knew that he was the big shot that Kai Qing and the others wanted to invite to the banquet. Zheng Kaiyuan had just taken the initiative to talk to Lin Yuan, but Lin Yuan had been ignoring him. Lin Yuan's gaze toward him was very indifferent, as if he didn't know him. Moreover, Zheng Kaiyuan couldn't guess the relationship between Tian Ningning and Lin Yuan. If Tian Ningning and Lin Yuan were just ordinary friends, the people present might still be able to keep their lives. If Tian Ningning was Lin Yuan's girlfriend, they wouldn't be the only ones who would be finished. Their families would also be implicated in the disaster. Zheng Kaiyuan looked fiercely at Kai Qing, who was squatting on the ground with a pale face. If it wasn't for Kai Qing's viciousness, he might have been able to deepen his relationship with Lin Yuan after meeting him. Chapter 999. Lin Yuan was rarely so angry. Lin Yuan didn't expect that the burns on Tian Ningning's body were actually caused by the pebbles used to grill the pebble python beef. What kind of evil person would pour a 300 to 400 degrees Celsius stone on a heavily injured girl? In the past, Lin Yuan was very tolerant of most people and things, but there was a limit to his tolerance. Lin Yuan did not intend to tolerate this situation anymore. Lin Yuan waved his hand, and a red card with all kinds of exceptional fire patterns appeared in his hand. I heard from Zhong Zhe that this card can open the Ethereal Peony Pavilion of the Spirit Food Pavilion. In the Ethereal Peony Pavilion, you can eat the secret 300 plates of Kitchen Incense Palace. Is that true? After saying that, Lin Yuan threw the card at Steward Kai. When Steward Kai received the card that Lin Yuan tossed over, his body started to shiver. The Spirit Food Pavilion rarely issued cards of the highest level, and each card had a serial number on it. The card that Lin Yuan had just tossed over was numbered 5. This number 5 card was the serial number of Zhong Zhe, the youngest disciple of Chef Supreme of Kitchen Incense Temple. In other words, the card in his hand actually belonged to Zhong Zhe. Steward Kai did not think that anyone could snatch this card from Zhong Zhe's hands. For this card to appear in Lin Yuan's hands meant that Zhong Zhe had personally given it to him. This card being used meant that the matter that happened before his eyes was completely not something that he, the steward of the Fragrant Kitchen Pavilion, could carry out. Steward Kai said in a trembling voice, "Yes, sir, you can. Do you need me to open the Peony Hall of Floating World now and let you order the 300 dishes in the murals in the Peony Hall of Floating World?" Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan sneered. Even if it's a sheep's temper, I'm afraid it can't eat any more. I remember that among the 300 plates, there was a fire thorn cooked stone eel. It was a main dish among the 300 plates. Someone invited my friend to eat the pebbles in the pebble python beef, so I'll invite him to eat the firethorn in the firethorn cooked eel. At that time, steward, you will personally serve the dishes for the person who invited my friend to eat the pebbles in the pebble python beef. Steward Kai's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. As the steward of the capital's spiritual food pavilion, he naturally had a deep understanding of the 300 plates of firethorn cooked eels. The firethorn in the firethorn cooked eel was the fruit of the platinum plant Fey geocentric thorn grass. The geocentric thorn grass grew in the interior of a volcano, and its living environment was over 800 degrees Celsius all year round. As the fruit of the geocentric thorn grass, the firethorn itself possessed an extremely high temperature. At the same time, it also possessed an extremely strong fire poison. The core of the firethorn cooked eel dish was to use the firethorn, which had a high temperature of 800 to 900 degrees, and the fire poison in it to neutralize the spiritual poison in the eel. In the end, the two poisons combined under high temperatures to form a medicinal effect that was very beneficial to the muscles and bones. It could be said that delicacies like the cobblestone python beef, which needed to be cooked after the dish was served, had the same principle as cooking eels with firethorn. However, the lethality of the firethorns was not something that could be compared to a pebble that had been roasted by a heavenly flame to 300 degrees Celsius. If the firethorns landed on a person's body, they would probably burn through their flesh. Even if there was a powerful healing-type spirit chi professional to heal them afterward, the firethorns would probably burn through their flesh. The burned area would also form a purplish-black mark due to the accumulation of fire poison. In such a situation, Steward Kai didn't have the right to say no. "Why, my lord, I will get someone to prepare it now." Kai Ching had already faintly recovered from her spiritual injury. Previously, Kai Ching's spiritual injury was so painful that she couldn't move, but she could still hear the words around her clearly. Kai Ching sat on the ground in a daze. Kai Ching, who was used to being ruthless to others, felt like a fish on a chopping board for the first time. Soon enough, Steward Kai carried the 300 plates of firethorn cooked eel to Lin Yuan and said with a trembling voice, "My lord, the firethorn cooked eel that you ordered is ready." Lin Yuan glanced at Kai Ching and said, "My lord, the firethorn cooked eel that you ordered is ready." Lin Yuan glanced at Kai Ching and said, "My lord, the firethorn cooked eel that you ordered is ready." Since this lady wants us to get lost from the Yimei Hall, it means that this lady really wants to eat in the Yimei Hall. Then let's satisfy this lady's wish. Send her to the Yimei Hall to slowly enjoy the stewed eel. Steward Kai glanced at Kai Ching and said to the two attendants behind him, "The two of you drag Kai Ching to the Yimei Hall. The two of you drag Kai Ching to the Yimei Hall." After speaking, Steward Kai bowed and said to Lin Yuan, "My lord, I guarantee that I'll see her eat every single one of the firethorn on the plate." After seeing Kai Ching and Steward Kai enter Yimei Hall, Lin Yuan's gaze landed on Zheng Kaiyuan. Lin Yuan took 2 steps forward and placed his hand on Zheng Kaiyuan's shoulder. "What? Are you eating with them too?" Upon hearing Lin Yuan's question, Zheng Kaiyuan hurriedly answered, "I'm here to eat with my cousin today. These people are treating my cousin. I just didn't have a place to eat, so I followed my cousin to the Spirit Food Pavilion to have a bite. I didn't expect to meet Brother Lin here." Zheng Kaiyuan had just been frightened by Lin Yuan's means. Now that Lin Yuan had taken the initiative to talk to him, Zheng Kaiyuan immediately became excited. This meant that Lin Yuan still recognized him. At the same time, Zheng Kaiyuan hurriedly removed himself from this matter. He did not want Lin Yuan to think that he had a share in this floating bamboo hall's meal. To be honest, Zheng Kaiyuan didn't know many of the rising and veteran forces' younger generation present. As long as Lin Yuan investigated a little, he would be able to find out. Upon hearing Zheng Kaiyuan's words, Miao He's face immediately turned ugly. Back then, he had not wanted to bring Zheng Kaiyuan to the Spirit Food Pavilion's gathering. It was Zheng Kaiyuan who wanted to put on airs and forced him to bring him. In the end, Zheng Kaiyuan had cleanly removed himself and did not forget to mention Miao He's name. Zheng Kaiyuan was simply too disgusting. When Lin Yuan heard Zheng Kaiyuan address him as Brother Lin, a hint of killing intent emerged in his eyes. Previously, Lin Yuan had not put in the effort to target the Zheng family. Now it was time to permanently remove this trouble. After addressing Lin Yuan as Brother Lin, Zheng Kaiyuan felt very perturbed. Upon seeing that Lin Yuan did not refute him, Zheng Kaiyuan boldly continued to address him. "Brother Lin, I have some things to do recently. I have to settle the grudge between me and Sky City. That's why I haven't called you. I'll settle the grudge with Sky City in a few days. I wonder if you have time, Brother Lin. Can I bring a small gift to visit Brother Lin? Lin Yuan's eyes flickered when he heard Zheng Kaiyuan's words. Ah, Sky City? Upon hearing Lin Yuan mention Sky City, Zheng Kaiyuan hurriedly replied, Sky City's people killed my subordinates previously. The people from Sky City killed my subordinates. I'm going to send someone to challenge Sky City at the Polar Arena in the royal capital. Get rid of Sky City through the Polar Arena. The third chapter. This book is finally at the 1000th chapter. Asking for a wave of recommendation tickets, monthly tickets, full subscriptions and tips. I hope everyone can support button. One love you all. End of this chapter. Chapter 1000. Lin Yuan knew about the Radiance Federation's Extreme Arena. Not only the royal capital, but the major cities in the Radiance Federation also had a place that specialized in handling faction grudges. This place was the Extreme Arena. After all, the population in the big cities was very dense and many ordinary people lived there. Even when king-class experts fought with each other, as long as one side was not crushed by the other, they would instantly lose their resistance. Could cause a great impact. Therefore, the major factions' experts were not allowed to fight in private in the big cities. Of course, there were exceptions. If the experts of the two factions fought in the royal capital, it would not cause a bad impact. The Spirit Guards and the Iron Law Institution could not be bothered. Lin Yuan had just decided to completely get rid of the Zheng family, the enemy that had been established since Sky City was established. He did not expect Zheng Kaiyuan to have already decided how to attack Sky City. Actually, this was within Lin Yuan's expectations. After all, Lin Yuan had called Zheng Kaiyuan at the Nix assembly to make Zheng Kaiyuan arrogant. Lin Yuan looked at Zheng Kaiyuan, who was abnormally respectful and fawning toward him, and the corners of his mouth curled up inexplicably. The Extreme Arena requires both sides to agree to participate in the Extreme Arena. If Sky City doesn't agree to participate in the Extreme Arena, won't your preparations be in vain? Zheng Kaiyuan narrowed his eyes, which revealed a ruthless glint. Brother Lin, given your status, I don't think you will spend time on the Extreme Arena between factions. You probably don't know the rules of this Extreme Arena. Most of the Extreme Arena agreed upon between factions are gambling. The Spirit Guards and the Iron Law Institution are the witnesses, and the two major factions sign a bet. Finally, they will send out experts to fight. The losing party needs to complete the agreement with the other party according to the contents of the bet. This kind of gambling Extreme Arena is the most common way for the major factions to use force to solve problems. After all, it is very difficult for two factions with comparable strength to kill the other party in a faction struggle. However, I think the agreement with Sky City is not the common gambling Extreme Arena between factions, but the Blood Oath Extreme Arena. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes, which revealed an inexplicable look. When Zheng Kaiyuan saw the look in Lin Yuan's eyes, he suddenly felt like he was being stared at by a dangerous behemoth. There was a strong sense of oppression in his heart. Lin Yuan did not have any research on the Radiance Federation's Pole Arena, but the diligent genius had been absorbing all kinds of knowledge on the Star Web. Therefore, Lin Yuan was very clear about the Bet Extreme Fight and the Blood Oath Extreme Fight. The Bet of Extremity Duel could be seen as the two sides using force to negotiate, using force to solve problems that couldn't be solved through negotiation and resource wars. Under normal circumstances, it was very rare for members of both factions to die in a bet. However, the Blood Oath Extreme Battle was completely different. The Blood Oath Extreme Battle would only end when the members of one side were all dead. When all the members sent out for the Blood Oath Extreme Battle were killed, it proved that this faction was weak in terms of peak strength. Moreover, the Blood Oath Extreme Battle itself symbolized that the battle between the two forces could not be resolved. Hence, in the Blood Oath Extreme Battle, all the resources of the faction whose peak combat power was wiped out would be taken over by the other faction. The Iron Law Institute used the method of blood oaths in the Extreme Arena to mediate the conflicts between the major powers. It could be said that 2/3 of the Radiance Federation's factions had disappeared in the Pole Arena. The Pole Arena was like a huge meat grinder that constantly devoured the lives of the experts between the factions. However, it was also because of the existence of the Pole Arena that the war between the factions would not threaten the safety of ordinary people. The Blood Oath Extreme Battle is a little interesting. But I remember that when one side issued the Blood Oath Extreme Battle, the other side can also choose not to accept it. Zheng Kaiyuan had mentioned his plan for Sky City just to find an excuse to talk to Lin Yuan. He didn't expect Lin Yuan to be quite interested in what he had to say. Zheng Kaiyuan's heart was immediately greatly encouraged. In Zheng Kaiyuan's opinion, only by talking a few more words with Lin Yuan could his relationship with Lin Yuan improve further. Please don't worry, I have absolute confidence that Sky City will accept the Blood Oath Extreme Battle. If Sky City doesn't accept the Blood Oath Extreme Battle, it will lose all its reputation. In the future, no faction will dare to cooperate with Sky City. Even if Sky City decides to be a coward and not come out, I've already grasped its roots. If the Sky Castle is so cowardly, I'll start from the roots and uproot the entire Sky Castle. Zheng Kaiyuan did not say what the root of Sky City was, but Lin Yuan felt that he should be talking about the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. Before the start of the Evernight Assembly, the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce had been disturbed by the Zheng family's spies. Of course, these spies were all cleaned up by Duan He in the process of investigating the Spirit Deer Chamber of Commerce. Lin Yuan felt that Zheng Kaiyuan's statement was rather interesting. The Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce had never been the root of Sky City. It was just an exposed branch of the big tree that was Sky City. However, Zheng Kaiyuan's idea had solved a lot of Lin Yuan's problems. Through the Blood Oath Extreme Duel, Lin Yuan could also kill the Zheng family's experts. Instead, they would occupy Zheng Kaiyuan's resources. Upon seeing that Lin Yuan was considering his words, Zheng Kaiyuan's eyes flickered as he gathered his courage and asked, "Brother Lin, would it be possible for you to attend the Blood Oath battle between the Zheng family and Sky City?" Lin Yuan glanced sideways at Zheng Kaiyuan and asked, "I remember you are the second young master of the Zheng family, right? Can you stand out and make a decision for the Zheng family?" Zheng Kaiyuan hurriedly said, "My father didn't agree at first and he didn't allow me to attack Sky City. Didn't I borrow 2 Pinnacle Emperor-class experts from the Miao family who possessed 2 Pinnacle Myth 3 Phase? I even convinced my father to ask my grandfather to join the Blood Oath Extreme Duel. My grandfather also has a Pinnacle Myth 3 Fei. Let's see how Sky City can block such strength." Zheng Kaiyuan, who had been extremely inflated recently, could not help but reveal a touch of madness even in front of Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan curled his lips when he heard Zheng Kaiyuan's words. Previously he had only heard of cheating the father, but he had never heard of cheating the master. No matter how powerful a peak emperor was, if one didn't reach the Overlord realm, they wouldn't be able to fight against Endless Summer and the Killer Butterfly. There was a huge gap between emperor level and emperor level. Lin Yuan said to Zheng Kaiyuan meaningfully, "Don't worry. I won't be going to the extreme arena. There won't be any emperor-class combat power, so it'll be boring. I'll have time in a few days. You can visit the manor at any time after the Blood Oath Extreme Battle." The first one was even worse. End of chapter. Chapter 1001. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Zheng Kaiyuan revealed an ecstatic expression. Miao He, who was standing at the back, looked at Zheng Kaiyuan with resentment and fear. Miao He was already suspicious of Zheng Kaiyuan's relationship with Lin Yuan. Miao He didn't think that Zheng Kaiyuan could be related to the Moon Empress disciple given his status. If Zheng Kaiyuan wasn't Miao Jisheng's son, Miao He wouldn't even look at him. After all, Pinnacle Faction's younger generation core members didn't even bother to interact with veteran faction's descendants. However, Zheng Kaiyuan had such a good relationship with the Moon Empress disciple, but he didn't plead for leniency for him and even stepped on him. What kind of demon cousin is this? Miao He had already made up his mind that if he could survive this calamity, even if Zheng Kaiyuan was still appreciated by his grandfather in the Miao family, he had to be absolutely irreconcilable with Zheng Kaiyuan. Moreover, Zheng Kaiyuan had mentioned 2 experts with Pinnacle Myth 3 Phase. One of them was his elder brother's Path Protector, and the other was his Path Protector. Now they seemed to have become Zheng Kaiyuan's subordinates. Miao He had always been arrogant and looked down on others. Even if Miao He was afraid of the punishment he was about to receive, he still looked at Zheng Kaiyuan with hatred. Miao He felt that he had been wronged. Putting aside the fact that he didn't do anything, he still had to watch Zheng Kaiyuan act. Zheng Kaiyuan's surname wasn't Miao. Even if his grandfather valued him, he was still a veteran faction's descendant. However, Zheng Kaiyuan's words made people think that Zheng Kaiyuan was like the Gao family's Gao Feng, who had been accepted as a disciple by Her Majesty. Zheng Kaiyuan originally wanted to talk more with Lin Yuan so that Lin Yuan would have a deeper impression of him. He didn't expect to receive Lin Yuan's invitation to visit the mansion at any time. In Zheng Kaiyuan's opinion, this was a great honor. Moreover, wasn't his grandfather thinking about how to apologize to Lin Yuan in exchange for the golden lotus brocade stock that was of great help to creation masters? If he went to the mansion and settled the matter, then he might directly join the Miao family's elder council in the beast creation garden. By then he could openly use the Miao family's resources to promote the Zheng family from a veteran faction to a pinnacle faction. Zheng Kaiyuan, who was scheming in his heart, did not know that Lin Yuan was also scheming in his heart. The only thought in his mind now was to take advantage of the Blood Oath Extreme Duel to obtain a few law crystals at the pinnacle of Myth 3 that were suitable for him. In that case he would soon obtain the opportunity to enter the next world with complete loss. No matter what, the Zheng family was an old force that had been developing for 100 years. If Sky City could take over the offline resources of the Zheng family, they could absorb the useful resources and dispose of the useless ones. Sky City would be able to quickly obtain a huge amount of materials and resources, and achieve great development. The Zheng family's function was in the luxury goods direction, which coincided with the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's function. It could help the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce expand its luxury goods resources. Lin Yuan patted Zheng Kaiyuan's shoulder as a form of encouragement. Even though the doors of Yimei Hall were closed, everyone could still hear the faint cries of pain. Everyone thought of Kai Qing eating the fire thorns in the room and felt their hair stand on end. Because no one could imagine what would happen to a person after eating a fire thorn. After a long time, Yimei Hall's door was opened. Steward Kai walked over with a delicate plate with no fire thorns but only stone eel slices. He was sweating and trembling. Sir, Kai Qing has already finished all the fire thorns in the fire thorn cooked stone eel. While speaking, Steward Kai saw the noble-looking youth in front of him pull up the corners of his mouth into a slightly cold arc. He said in a clear voice, "Since Kai Qing has eaten all the fire thorns, you shall eat the remaining stone eel slices." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Steward Kai felt his knees go weak. The stone eel slices on the plate were not cooked and had not absorbed enough fire poison to neutralize the neurotoxins in them. Thus, the stone eel meat still had a powerful mental poison. If he ate it, would it still be good? Upon seeing the expression on Steward Kai's face, Lin Yuan frowned again. A feeling of disgust arose in his heart. Steward Kai looked very similar to Kai Qing, and they should be blood-related. Of course, it didn't matter if they were blood-related or not. When Tian Ningning was almost half dead by Kai Qing, Steward Kai had mercilessly thrown her out. He even wanted to detain Tian Ningning's fei. His actions were no different from Kai Qing's. Seeing that Steward Kai was trembling and not moving, Lin Yuan ignored him and looked at Miao He. I, Lin Yuan, have always believed in this saying. If there is a mistake, bear it yourself. Don't implicate your family. Miao He wasn't the only one who heard Lin Yuan's words. Even the younger generation of the rising and veteran factions, who knew that Lin Yuan had an extraordinary identity, let out a breath of relief in their hearts. No matter what, the consequences of this matter had ended when it came to him. No matter how severe the punishment was, it would not implicate the faction behind him. Lin Yuan looked at Tian Ningning and asked, "They injured you. They hurt you. What are you going to do?" Tian Ningning felt that Lin Yuan was extremely handsome. As a girl, Tian Ningning didn't think that Kai Qing would end up badly. If it wasn't for Lin Yuan, Tian Ningning didn't dare to imagine what would have happened to her. If she had been thrown out, the crystal horn stag might not have survived either. Lin Yuan, only Kai Qing and Steward Kai injured me. It's not anyone else's fault. Before you came out, this person even helped me block an attack from the blunt-winged wild wolf. Otherwise, my crystal horn stag might have been bitten to death by the blunt-winged wild wolf. Therefore, I just need Kai Qing and Steward Kai to pay the price. Lin Yuan didn't say anything, but the way he looked at Tian Ningning was more appreciative than before. It was an extremely rare quality to still maintain one's original heart in such a situation. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard the youth with the flat nose whom Tian Ningning had pointed at earlier speak. "Why don't we leave our contact information with young lady Tian? If young lady Tian thinks of how to punish us or if you need anything, just give us a call. If there is anything we can do or need to do, just give us an order and we will do our best to complete it." Tian Ningning's eyes lit up. The second was even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 1002. There were 20 to 30 young masters in front of him, and they were from both new and old forces. There was also Miao He who came from a top force. Now that these people had given him their contact information, his information channels would be greatly expanded in the future. It would also help him better as Black's exclusive reporter, as well as his identity as the team's reporter. Alright. Then leave your phone numbers with me. You didn't attack me in the first place, so you don't owe me anything. I only hope that when I contact you for some information in the future, you can tell me a thing or two. After saying that, Tian Ningning shook the second-class Star Web reporter badge hanging on her chest to show everyone that she was a Star Web reporter. Everyone looked at Tian Ningning with gratitude in their eyes. He felt that Tian Ningning was his second parent. Everyone enthusiastically added Tian Ningning's phone number and told her their phone number. He planned to repay Tian Ningning's kindness to the best of his ability in the future when Tian Ningning needed his help. If Lin Yuan had looked at Tian Ningning with admiration before, then he now felt that Tian Ningning had an ability that was very similar to listen. That was the use of interpersonal relationships. Tian Ningning could imperceptibly turn enemies or strangers into her own resources. With these resources, Tian Ningning's future development in Star Web would definitely improve. After Tian Ningning added everyone's phone numbers, Lin Yuan noticed that Steward Kai still didn't dare to reach for the stone eel slices on his plate. Lin Yuan glanced at Miao He, who was looking at Zheng Kaiyuan with a gloomy gaze. Since they invited you to this party, you should take some responsibility for this conflict. Miao He's heart thumped. He originally thought that he had escaped a calamity, but he didn't expect to be called out by the Moon Empress disciple. At this moment, Miao He's hatred for Zheng Kaiyuan almost reached its peak. Miao He felt that if Zheng Kaiyuan had not deliberately mentioned it, he would not have been called out again. Lin Yuan's identity was there, and he was the true son of heaven. Thus, Miao He didn't dare to have any negative emotions, let alone hate Lin Yuan. These negative emotions were automatically transferred to Zheng Kaiyuan by Miao He. Miao He quickly bowed and braced himself. Lord Lin Yuan, I came to attend the banquet after receiving news of the invitation. I didn't expect such a thing to happen. If you want me to take responsibility, I'm willing to take any punishment. At the same time, I can also give a large amount of resources to Miss Tian as compensation. Lin Yuan nodded in response. You can talk to Tian Ningning about this in private. You've seen everything that happened in the Spirit Food Pavilion. I'll leave it to you to explain to the Spirit Food Pavilion. After speaking, Lin Yuan glanced at Steward Kai and continued speaking to Miao He. I'm sure you'll be able to handle the rest, right? Upon hearing that, Miao He immediately understood Lin Yuan's meaning and hurriedly replied, That's right. Don't worry, milord. If some people eat less of what they should eat, not only will they fail to live up to milord's good intentions, but they will also fail to live up to the famous 300 plates of kitchen incense palace. Leave everything here to me. Lin Yuan ignored Miao He and left the Spirit Food Pavilion with the remaining money after settling the bill with Tian Ningning at the front desk. On the way to the mansion, Lin Yuan saw that Tian Ningning kept looking at him as though she had a lot of questions but didn't know how to ask. Lin Yuan said, If you have anything to ask, just ask. There's no need to keep it in your heart. It's still the same thing I said during the meal. Say everything you know and don't hold back. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Tian Ningning no longer hesitated and hurriedly asked the questions in her heart. I wonder if it's convenient for you to tell me why so many of the younger generation of the veteran factions and top factions are speaking up for your original identity and attacking your identity as the combat class Spirit Chi professional Black? Upon hearing Tian Ningning's question, Lin Yuan raised his brows. Lin Yuan knew that Tian Ningning would ask this. This question was also what Lin Yuan intended to tell Tian Ningning when he looked for her this time. It's because they found out who my master is during the Nix conference. Upon hearing that, Tian Ningning immediately became curious. Let alone a Class 2 reporter like Tian Ningning, even the few Class 5 reporters on Star Web did not have the qualifications to interview the Nix conference. Thus, the Nix assembly was incomparably mysterious to Tian Ningning. However, Tian Ningning knew that those who were qualified to enter the Nix assembly were at least core members of the younger generation of top veteran factions. Tian Ningning had already guessed that Black or Lin Yuan's identity was extraordinary. It was obvious just by looking at the contracted face. Even if an ordinary person was talented enough to comprehend a willpower rune, they would not be able to obtain a silver/fantasy breed healing type Fey. However, Tian Ningning simply couldn't think or didn't dare to think about Lin Yuan's master's identity. Even the direct descendants of the top force's younger generation were so afraid of him. At that moment, Tian Ningning recalled the person who had spoken up for them on Star Web. It was the person who had been verified as the young palatial lord of Yeang Palace. At that time, Tian Ningning only thought that Long Tao had used his connections to ask the young palace master of Yeang Palace to speak for him. But now, it seemed that the young palatial lord of Night End Palace probably knew Lin Yuan. Tian Ningning said half-jokingly. Haha, your master can't be the Moon Empress, right? As soon as the words left her mouth, Tian Ningning felt that her words were a little rude. How could the Moon Empress casually joke about it? Even if this joke didn't have any evil intentions, before Tian Ningning could retort, she saw Lin Yuan nod and smile brightly, revealing his white teeth. Lin Yuan's smile directly crashed into Tian Ningning's heart. It made Tian Ningning subconsciously think that Lin Yuan's appearance seemed to be more capable of fighting than his strength. At that moment, Tian Ningning saw Lin Yuan nod and say, "That's right. My master is the Moon Empress." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Tian Ningning, who was riding on Blackie's back, nearly slipped and fell off Blackie's back. After knowing Lin Yuan's identity, Tian Ningning didn't say a word along the way. She had a sluggish expression as she digested the information that Lin Yuan provided. Tian Ningning suddenly felt that this world was a little mystical. How did I suddenly become the exclusive reporter of the Moon Empress disciple? After digesting for a moment, Tian Ningning suddenly raised her head and looked at Lin Yuan with burning eyes. It could be said that after today's contact, Blackie had become more realistic and three-dimensional in Tian Ningning's heart. Back then, that low-profile little hero who had commanded the Sea of Flowers in Millstone Town actually had such an illustrious identity. Chapter 3. End of this chapter. Chapter 1003. As Tian Ningning lamented Lin Yuan's identity, she felt a sense of pressure in her heart. As the Moon Empress disciple's exclusive reporter, Tian Ningning felt that she still had many areas to improve. After returning to the mansion, Lin Yuan asked Wen Yu to settle Tian Ningning down and introduce her to everyone in the mansion. Tian Ningning followed Zhang Xiaobai and the others to the Dome Guild Club's location and began to understand the Guild Club's current situation. He was going to solve the possible negative impact of them jumping from the Extreme Guild Club to the Dome Guild Club on Star Web. Lin Yuan looked at the time. Just as he was about to enter the Spirit Lock spatial zone to enhance the snake phase for his new daughter, Wendy, to Bronze/Legend, Listen and Hu Quan walked in from outside. Listen hurriedly took 2 steps forward, took out a face storage box and handed it to Lin Yuan. "Young master, these are 50 questions beasts that Qin Luan gave me. He said that you need them." Listen was a little puzzled. The 100 questions beasts in the face storage box were not in good condition and had mixed fur. Even some ordinary people were not willing to buy such 100 questions beasts as their housekeeping beast. Why did Lin Yuan want 50 of them? Listen could not imagine what use Lin Yuan had for these 100 questions beast. Listen felt that this face storage box of the 100 questions beast was quite lucky. No matter how humble their origins were, their fate had changed when they reached Lin Yuan's level. Lin Yuan reached out to take the face storage box that contained the 100 questions beast. "Listen, take Qin Luan and Qin Yu with you for a while. Let Qin Luan have a good experience. In addition, Qin Yu is now 12 or 13 years old, which is the age to go to school. However, Qin Yu has no foundation at all, so it is not realistic to go to school directly. Find a full-time teacher for Qin Yu and let him tutor him for a year. Alright, he will have a good foundation next year and go to the Royal Capital's low-class Spirit Chi Academy." Lin Yuan had already decided to accept Qin Luan and Qin Yu, so he naturally had to consider their development. Although Qin Luan ran a face store and knew the ways of the world, it was not the same as knowledge. Qin Luan had been working hard in the store and rarely came into contact with the outside world, which was equivalent to having a thin veil covering his eyes. Lin Yuan asked Listen to take off the veil in front of Qin Luan's eyes. Sometimes knowledge was far more important than strength. Anyway, he had not found the rare and precious Extreme Night Jade Scorpion for Qin Luan and Qin Yu, so Qin Luan could not improve his strength even if he wanted to. Qin Yu was still young, so going to school at this age was undoubtedly the best choice. It wouldn't be too late to talk about other things after he grew up. Listen nodded in response. "Don't worry, young master. I will definitely take care of these matters. It's just that Qin Yu is 12 or 13 years old. It's a little too old for him to take the first-year exam for the Royal Capital's low-rank Spirit Chi Academy. If Qin Yu is willing to endure hardship and learn more knowledge in this 1 year, he can directly go to the Royal Capital's Spirit Chi Academy's 4th-year examination. This can ensure that Qin Yu is surrounded by people of the same age, and Qin Yu can also better integrate into the group." When Lin Yuan heard Listen's suggestion, he felt that it made sense. In a low-class Spirit Chi Academy where there were many children, children's words carried no harm. As a transfer student, Qin Yu was likely to be ostracized and isolated by his classmates, regardless of whether he was too old or too young. Given Qin Yu's character, which had been shaped by the pressure of survival at such a young age, even if he was isolated, he would only endure it. This was likely to cause Qin Yu's originally cheerful personality to become unsociable. If such a thing really happened, it would go against Lin Yuan's original intention of letting Qin Yu study at the royal capital's intermediate spirit Qi Academy. Therefore, Lisan's suggestion of a fourth year was indeed Qin Yu's best choice. Now that the matter was handed over to Lisan to handle, Lin Yuan was very assured that Lisan was reliable. At that moment, Lin Yuan heard Hu Quan chuckle. Lin Yuan, according to what you said a few days ago, I have carefully selected 500 spirit craftsmen from the Heavenly Craft Pavilion. After I told them about my request to live in seclusion, only 35 brats decided to participate. Later on, when I said that I had secluded myself from the world for 10 years, quite a few brats were tempted. In the end, there were about 130 people. In the end, after I mentioned the benefits you offered, all the little bastards rushed to participate. In the end, according to your request, I only chose the little bastards who immediately decided to participate after I said that I would live in seclusion. When the Heavenly Craft Pavilion accepted people, I passed these spirit craftsmen's abilities. Some of the little bastards who decided to participate at the beginning were weak and some were older. But they are loyal and worth nurturing. Last night, I asked these people to prepare the items needed for the seclusion. These people are now gathered in the Heavenly Craft Pavilion. If young master needs them, I can bring them over at any time. In fact, through Lin Yuan's request to choose spirit craftsman, Hu Quan, a class 5 spirit craftsman who had devoted himself to studying spirit craftsmanship, had a feeling in his heart. Ability was not as important as loyalty. Through this choice, Hu Quan divided the Heavenly Craft Pavilion's more than 500 spirit craftsmen into several grades in his heart. This grade wasn't based on ability, but on the degree of loyalty. Hu Quan planned to nurture the first batch of 35 spirit craftsmen who had chosen to live in seclusion in the future. Hu Quan planned to observe the second batch of spirit craftsmen who had come forward. As for the more than 300 spirit craftsmen who had not been willing to live in seclusion at first but had chosen to live in seclusion after learning of Lin Yuan's generous conditions, Hu Quan intended to give up on nurturing them. He would only teach them some basic things, and the Heavenly Craft Pavilion's tedious work would be handed over to these people. As a Class 5 spirit craftsman, no matter how skilled Hu Quan was, he would not be able to be the teacher of 500 spirit craftsmen at one time. Compared to casting a wide net in the past, Hu Quan decided to settle down and nurture loyal little bastards. Anyway, the Heavenly Craft Pavilion spirit craftsmen were paid for their work, and the salary was higher than that of spirit craftsmen who took on part-time jobs outside. It was not a bad deal for those little bastards who he did not intend to guide but were working in the Heavenly Craft Pavilion. Lin Yuan's eyes lit up when he heard Hu Quan's words. Lin Yuan thought for a moment and said, "That's right." He thought for a moment and said, "Then, Uncle Hu, bring these 35 spirit craftsmen over. Since they have already prepared the items needed for seclusion, the earlier they work, the earlier they can start the construction of the swamp world. In addition, prepare more building materials for building houses, fey breeding bases, breeding rooms and other basic and functional facilities." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's instructions, Lisan hurriedly became serious and asked, "First more." End of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.